Other people who don't see yet?
But before you start, one note, Mariana is going to run late, and I believe Polly is going to take her part of the student report.
Great, thanks, Polly. Yeah, I was looking for Mariana, but I wasn't sure. Okay, I'd like to call to order the December 14th, 2020 regular voting meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting, setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Members of the public, during this meeting, we ask you all to mute yourselves unless you are speaking during a public comment period. If needed, we may mute you from the Zoom host console. You may leave your video on or off at your option. Excuse me. If we experience bandwidth or other issues and believe that limiting video could help, we may turn your video off. This meeting will include at least 2 public comment periods. If at that time you wish to speak, please raise your blue virtual hand in Zoom and wait for me to call on you. If you can't raise your virtual hand, or if I miss your virtual hand, please turn on your video camera and raise your actual hand. New Jersey law now requires us to inform you that all public commenters must behave appropriately. In Highland Park, this means no screaming, obscenities, or inappropriate video displays. In the event of a speaker's inappropriate behavior, they will be muted, and we'll come back to them later. If the speaker is the final commenter of the final comment period, we will invite them to return at our next meeting. Linda, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Morasti?
Here.
Ms. Coleman?
Here.
Ms. Gowan?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Here.
Ms. Bruce?
Here.
Mr. Roslevich? Mr. Woodward?
Here.
Thanks. Now everyone is invited to join us if they'd like in the Pledge of Allegiance. Linda and Scott, would you lead it for us, please? Thanks.
I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the
to
flag
the flag
of the United
of the
States
United States,
and to the republic for which it stands,
which stands
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
liberty,
and
justice for all.
Thank you so much. Linda, were there any communications this month? This week? Sorry.
I do not recall seeing anything now.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move that we approve the minutes of the virtual public workshop meeting of November 9th and the virtual regular public meeting of November 16th. Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion, any comments or questions? All right, seeing none, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
Ms. Bruce?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
Mr. Woodward?
Yes.
And now it's time for our student representative report. Polly, come on up.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so from last week, not much has happened, but there are a few things coming up. So tomorrow at the high school, in Mr. Gold's Zoom room, HP Monk is presenting the Season of Civics, which is a series of events meant to promote civic engagement, which should be really interesting. And then I guess in the same vein, on Wednesday in Ms. Berenga's Zoom room, Global Awareness is hosting Write for Rights workshop, which focuses on writing letters to prisons, asking them to free people who were wrongfully or unrightfully detained. And then more info can be found on hpmonk.com. Also Wednesday, lots of things happening on Wednesday. From 4:30 to 6:30, DECA is hosting a socially distanced winter wonderland walk in lieu of their annual Make-A-Wish walk, which normally happens in the fall. And then all proceeds benefit the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And then on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, The HPMS and HPHS bands, orchestras, and choirs will all perform virtually through a webinar sent through the mail. And then also coming up December and January, the Highland Park youth can still attend basketball Zoom workshops, which are featuring a bunch of super cool basketball coaches and experts. The next workshop, I believe, is Saturday, December 19th, and you can find that in Genesis as well for more details. The middle school, there's not much to report except that there is a tie for the Turkey in Disguise contest, which we mentioned last week. So those that have access to voting, they would really appreciate if you guys voted to break the tie. And then Bartle, there was no updates, but at Irving, they will be having a festive holiday wear day and pajama day next week. And then they have a winter sing-along with Miss Radke on the 22nd before break starts. And that wraps it up.
Thank you, Polly. I appreciate it. That was a good amount of stuff for just a week. Thanks so much. Anybody have questions or comments for Polly? Nope.
Where can we vote for the turkey contest?
Yes, good question.
I believe it's mostly open to parents. So if you have a child in the middle school, then you should be sent an email. It should be an email, but otherwise, you might have to contact Miss Brady.
Great, thanks. Mark, did I see you raising a hand or was that just a finger moving?
No, I was just moving.
Okay, all right. No moving, everybody. All right, so Scott, time for your report, please.
Thank you, Anne. I have Elizabeth Asamoah here, our Teen Center
Yay.
Director. She'll be, yeah, I'm excited as well. She'll be joining us momentarily. I want to present. Hi, Elizabeth. I'll formally introduce you again in a minute. I want to circle back to a couple of things that I brought up last week. First of all, so far we have had 23 people register for the testing program, the free testing program we kicked off last Thursday. Fortunately, none of the folks who tested were tested positive for COVID-19. So that's a good thing. I want to remind everybody that information can be found on the website, on Facebook, and an email I sent. So you can always go back to your email inbox or trash or wherever you put my email and find the registration link. You can register at any time, take as many tests as you wish. I was informed you do not have to re-register and go through the entire process every time you want to take a retest. And that's explained once you go onto the registration link. And the results are turned around within a couple of days. So that's where we stand on our testing program. It will continue indefinitely at the Bartle Gym. The next thing I want to return to is really what is the most important thing on our radar right now. When I say we, I'm talking about both the Board of Education and the leadership team. I'm going to spend a few slides showing updated data with everyone, and then want to emphasize a couple of points about a formal initiative that kicked off last week. First of all, I have tasked a couple of leaders who I'll identify in a few minutes to pick apart the data. And one thing they came to realize when they looked back at all the students who failed classes in middle and high school first marking period is that the data I shared with you wasn't entirely accurate. There were some inaccuracies. We sourced where the accuracies stem, so at least we know how the problem came about. So what I'd like to just share with you is updated numbers regarding the number of kids who failed at least one class. So the numbers you see here in color, using color bars, are the numbers I reported last week. In a second, I'm going to show you what the more accurate numbers are. It's difficult to compare the two sets of numbers. What I did do, however, is identify the most drastic changes one way or the other in the data. You'll see that when we corrected the data, we found that 10, when we broke down by subgroup, 10 more white students failed classes than we reported last week at the middle school. 6 fewer Hispanic students reported to have failed at least one class in middle school. I'm going to continue. This is the data I shared last week when I looked at the information with all of you according to these 3 subgroups: our English language learners, our special education students, and our low socioeconomic students. This is the data I showed you last week, and this is the more accurate data. And here are my key takeaways. A drastically lower number of special ed students we did identify failed at least one class than I reported last week, and 7 fewer English language learners were actually failed students last in marking period 1. At the high school, these were the numbers I shared with you last week. And these are the more accurate numbers. We saw a decrease when we looked at more accurate numbers in the number of Hispanic students who failed at least one class marking period 1, an increase though in the number of Black students at the high school who failed at least one class. Again, let me just point out that the data you're looking at now in the gray scaled bar graph area shows the more accurate data that we uncovered after we looked again at the numbers. We had fewer English language learner students fail classes than we anticipated. And what's interesting to note is that we actually saw 1 fewer special ed student at the high school fail a class, at least one class this year, marking period 1, than last year, marking period 1. I share this information just in the name of transparency, not to make a case one way or the other for anything other than the fact that we know we have a crisis on our hands, like districts around the country. What we have committed to doing now that we have the information in our hands is to implement something I'm calling, thanks to Mark Krieger's suggestion, Operation Student Mastery. Operation Student Mastery is going to be our full-on formal effort to use the marking period 1 summative assessment, i.e. grade data that we have. And I'm going to show you some of the things that we're going to do, make changes both to programs and to systems. The 2 individuals who are heading Operation Student Mastery are the middle school principal, Caitlin Brady, and middle school assistant principal, Chrissy Sukow. I assigned them the duties of being the operation managers. I'm calling them operation managers. The evening after last week's board meeting, I had a meeting with the leadership team Tuesday morning. I then directed Caitlin and Chrissy to take over the responsibility of this operation Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, they were blitzing me with emails, sharing new data. They have been swarming over this project. I'm very pleased with what I've seen so far. As the board pointed out last week, the board has the responsibility that the district leadership team has to do whatever it takes to leverage the data we now have, build on what we've already done, and I'm going to talk about a few of those things, and then make systemic changes. And what some of those systemic changes will look like, well, for starters, examining the assignment of F grades to students marking period 1. I have spent at least a week reading extensively articles, studies about grades and motivation, getting a lot of input from different stakeholders about what to do with the assignment of grades. And I'm close to making a decision, which I'd first like to discuss with the central leadership team. Darcy, Ann, and Mark are invited to that meeting, which will be, I believe, Wednesday. And then I'll make a final decision, which I'll broadcast to the board first and the general community by Friday, the 18th. I'm not prepared to get into details yet, but rest assured, there will be a change in the system, in the grading system. What we've already begun to do as part of our effort to focus on student mastery is look at the relationship among the various things that we know are factoring into kids' performance as they relate to the pandemic. For instance, is there a relationship between the discipline incident reports that we receive, which, by the way, have boiled down to really two things: students not showing up for class, and in some cases, students being inappropriate when on Zoom, using inappropriate language, making inappropriate gestures. Nothing too extraordinary, but nevertheless, we're going to look at if there is some kind of frequency in discipline incidents and grades. We're also going to be looking at attendance and its potential correlation to grades. We'll obviously be looking at mental health and how that's impacting students. And we're going to take a good look at the students as we build their profiles and the reasons why they may have failed at least one class. If much of it has to do with late assignments, then I can tell the board and the community who's here at the meeting, changes will be made. I am not going to accept an extensive amount of late assignments having done potential irreparable damage to a student's grades during the pandemic. So that's something which we're going to be taking a close look at as well. At the suggestion of Michelle McFadden, I reached out to my cabinet to get their input about some of what the board discussed last Monday. My cabinet, for those of you who are not familiar with this group, is a group of 8 students, 2 from each grade level, who are selected because we believe they have a lot to say. They represent the student body, but often don't hold formal leadership roles. This is a shot of a recent cabinet meeting I had with 5 students out of the 8 who appeared. And I want you to read some of the information they shared with me. When I asked them, the questions I asked them by email were, how do you feel the pandemic is impacting your academic growth? And what do you think about assigning students Fs first marking period? I'm going to show you 3 slides worth of quotes and just let you mull what they're saying over. This one in particular really struck my heart. Speaking of heart, that made me sad. And by the way, this quote you're seeing in the lower right corner is what affirms the notion that having students make up work in order to show mastery is not necessarily the right thing to do. It's going to be a very difficult thing for students to recover if we what could be an insurmountable amount of work that they owe teachers, if we do find that in fact there is a correlation between that and their grades. And the last quote I want to share with you. So Michelle, thanks for the suggestion. It was a good one. And I meet with these kids once a month at 1 o'clock. So I'll keep this thread alive, and I'll circle back to that in particular. So I mentioned the foundation upon which we want to build. I want to make something clear. There was something said in public comment at the last board meeting that compelled me to make sure I emphasize to the board and the folks who are here tonight that our teachers have been going above and beyond to be creative, to be proactive, to try to help our students. I see what happened in the first 4 months of school, not necessarily being as a failure on our part to do things the right way. I'm sorry, to do things with effort, but rather that we didn't, that it's more of a failure on our part to not have recognized some of the things that we may have recognized, and also learn that in fact, the pandemic is taking an even more severe toll, and now than it may have back in March, April, and May and June. Some of the things that our teachers have been doing have been putting in very long days. I had one teacher get back to me. I surveyed the leadership team and asked them to get back to me about some of those things that I might not be aware of our faculty are doing. Some teachers are indicating that they've been up since 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, responding to student emails, in some cases making phone calls. Teachers are putting in, as you could imagine, more than a traditional 8-hour day. And there has been, though it hasn't been consistent across the board, a level of flexibility provided to students. Once I learn more from Caitlin and Chrissy about the profiles of all these students, I'm going to, with that information, have to standardize across the board more than I standardized previously. And part of that might mean providing certain flexibilities about late assignments, certainly what we're doing with keeping Zoom video on and off across the board with all teachers. But I want the information that Chrissy and Caitlin are compiling before I go forward and do that. Some shots of what our Irving faculty have been up to, and just a couple of things I also want to add that our faculty have been doing. We need to do more. We need to do even better, and we need to learn from the information we now have. Having collected the first marking period grades. I'll obviously have more to report because I'm, as you can sense, it's just circling back to something we talked about only 7 days ago, but rest assured the board is going to get a detailed email from me, likely by the end of this week, if not Monday, before winter break. And then I'll report out to the board publicly at one of our next meetings in January. This is a good lead into what we know is a major problem, and that's our students' mental health and well-being. And that's why I've invited Elizabeth Asamoah here. Elizabeth Asamoah is a licensed clinical social worker. She's one of the therapists who works with students on a clinical level. Besides the work she does as a director of the Teen Center, she is fantastic at what she does, because what I've seen this Teen Center to be is one led to really change things systemically. The Teen Center is housed between the middle and the high school, but it serves the entire district. Sitting on the couch with my wife over the weekend working on my presentation, and I reflected on the reality that I just don't know what I would do if I didn't have the Teen Center. So with that, I'm inviting Elizabeth to share some of what she's been doing, starting with information about the data you're going to look at in a few minutes. A survey was conducted that I'll have Elizabeth talk about in just a second. For all middle and high school students, the full report, it's an extensive report. The full report can currently be found on the website, so the public can download the report. There are no names, it's a confidential set of data, by going to the virtual and in-person learning resources link right there on the main page. The board itself can go to the board meeting Google Drive and go to the superintendent's report folder, download the report in PDF format there. So Elizabeth, I'm going to pass the torch to you.
Okay.
Advance the slides and have you talk a little bit about the data.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, Elizabeth? Let me share these first few slides and then I'll turn to you. Forgive me.
Sure, no problem.
So yeah, sorry about that. So I'd like everybody to just take a look at the quantitative data I'm about to share, and then some of the qualitative data. Just a quick summary of what you're looking at. The survey questions were assessed on a Likert scale, 1 to 5, and I'm sharing with you the average or the mean scores that were reported back. We had close to 300 high school students respond and about 180, I believe 188, something close to that, middle school students respond. When asked about their overall mental health, these are the responses we received. Just clarify what you're looking at. The first bar graph set of bar data shows the impact that kids said remote learning had on their mental health. Again, this is a scale of 1 to 5. 5 meaning high impact, 1 meaning low impact. The second set of data there reflects the worry kids had about coming back in person and how that might impact their mental health. And then finally, their hope that the crisis will come to an end and how that's impacting their mental health.
And Scott, is that middle school with the darker bar and high school with the gray bar?
Forgive me, that's both middle and high school. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is high school. Hold on.
The prior slide, yes.
This is
That one,
middle
is
and high school.
So the first bar is middle, second bar is high?
Oh, forgive me. Yes, the first bar is
Okay.
middle school and the second bar is high school.
That's what I thought. Okay,
I
thanks.
should have labeled them. Thank you.
No, that's fine, thanks.
Thanks for asking that. I thought we were looking at before and after. Can you go back to that, please, really quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are just the high school results. I'm going to go back just to get your bearings. Middle school, high school, middle and high school.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of directionally challenged. I'm having a hard time with the lowest highest. What means what? Lowest means I'm having less problems, or lowest means I'm having more problems? I don't understand.
Elizabeth, do you want to clarify?
Yes, so the lowest means that it's more negative. That means they are having more problems with that. And the highest means that they are doing better.
Okay, so low
Yes.
number bad, higher number better. Okay, thank you.
So this is how they rated their mental health, in other words. Those between 1 to 5, they were given that Likert scale. Okay.
Do we have data?
Now we're talking about percent respondents suggesting the various things here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do we have any info about the pre-pandemic numbers, how they might compare? On that previous
Elizabeth?
slide.
Yes, we have that. I think you have that on the slide. The first few slides talk about that. So what we saw was that pre-pandemic, most of our students were doing better. And then post-pandemic, or during pandemic, their mental health is much lower. They're feeling more depressed, more anxious, and yes.
So, I mean, I fully see that the pandemic is having an effect. So
yes,
that's not, I mean, I understand personally, like that's what we expected, unfortunately. But would you say, as an expert, that those numbers pre-pandemic were, acceptable or appropriate for this age group?
I would say so. I think, based on the data that we collected from students, pre-pandemic, a lot of them, selected excellent, good, slightly good. So they were doing better. And then now they're not doing so much better like we expect them to be.
Michelle, I broke down
Could we go back to that slide that we're asking about right now?
Yeah, I'll do that. And I just want to follow up with Michelle. And Michelle, you'll see the pre and post pandemic data more clearly and in more detail when you download the data. There was so much to chew on that I didn't want to put it all in slides.
I was just getting, some perspective about, how much Ms. Asamoah thought the numbers,
Yep.
were indicative of a great drop. Like there's a understandable drop, of course, and knowing what they're worried about is important. But so I wanted to know, are we in a crisis mentally in our district before the pandemic? Because it seems to me like those numbers might not have been low as they are now, but they were not exactly high.
Elizabeth, I like the way Michelle phrased her question. Would you have considered the pre-pandemic numbers to be crisis level numbers?
I wouldn't have considered that. No, I wouldn't have considered that. And I think also even for some students that endorsed, lower during pandemic, scores, in other areas, they stated they were doing okay. So in a sense, I think things balance out a little bit in a sense. Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like you to take a look at this data. I'm not going to speak about it unless you have questions, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I just.
Yeah, can you explain it? Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly. I don't understand what I'm looking at. Like,
Okay, I'm sorry.
Did they choose all of them? Did they have to choose one? Did they have to choose 5? Like how?
Can you, first let me explain what you're looking at, and then Darcy, I'm going to ask that you clarify your question. So this is the percentage of students who indicated that the pandemic was having a negative impact on their mental health that is contributing to academic difficulties, that didn't have much impact, so on and so forth. Now, can you clarify your question, Darcy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand what I'm looking at. Like, I just don't
Elizabeth, do you want to expand on this?
Yes, so this is for the middle school results. So out of all the students that were surveyed, 16% indicated that the pandemic was having a negative impact on their mental health. 18% indicated they were having academic difficulties. 17% said was not much impact. The pandemic was not having much impact. 10% reported that there was some improvement in their overall mental health and overall well-being. 42% reported that the pandemic was having a negative social impact on them. And 2% reported that it was having a physical impact on them. And 9% reported that it was having an impact on their family.
But so like, are these all individual questions that they could just answer yes or no to? Like, is this having a negative impact on you overall? Yes, no. Is this having
Yes, it was a Likert scale. And so, but these are all individual questions. And so we asked them based on, to indicate based on the Likert scale we provided. I believe it was slightly, not slightly, excellent. I can't think of the individual questions right now, but we gave them a scale. And so based on the scale they selected, this is what we came up with.
Right, but so if we're saying 16% had a negative impact, are those the kids who on that scale said like a 5? Like, or again, I'm getting directional, like those are just the kids who said this is having a horrible impact on me, or these are the kids who said anything other than no, I'm cool. Like I just.
So these are the
sense. I have no idea what I'm looking at.
So the 16% are the kids that indicated that the pandemic was having a negative impact on their mental health based on the questions that we did ask them.
So 84% of students said that the pandemic was not having a negative impact?
That doesn't make sense.
I think they picked different areas. If we could, I'm not sure if we could show this, if we could show the survey, you would see how the questions were asked and how they responded to that. Yes.
Yeah, because from this, I don't, if that's on a Likert scale, then how do you determine a percentage? If like.
It looks like 84% of kids said the pandemic had no negative impact. So I think we're not understanding like how the. We'll take a look on the board folder and maybe we can get some more detail.
Yes, I think if you take a look at that, you will.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do want to share very quickly what you'll be looking at when you download the information. So first you'll see the quantitative data here. This is the download. Then you'll see the topics that were discussed.
Are we making this available to the public?
As I pointed out earlier, you can find it on the front page of the website in the in-person and remote learning resources page. It's currently made available.
Yes.
I have a question. I have my hand raised, but I still, because again, to Darcy's point, since this was a Likert scale survey instrument, I just wonder about the areas in between the 0 or whatever number showing no impact to high impact or whatever terms you used, because it seems like there would be more kids included possibly in that percentage of kids negatively impacted, because the question was not presented as are you negatively impacted or not? You know, it wasn't a yes or no. There was, you know, that continuum or range. So how is that accounted for in the percentages? That is, I think, still the question here.
Zilla, if you can please put the results there, maybe I can explain it better.
Thank you.
So should I scroll up to the top first question?
Yes, please.
There you go.
So this is the qualitative one in terms of, so we try to break it down with the questions so that we can have a better understanding of where the kids are. The other part is the quantitative one. That's the different one. So with this, you know, based on what the kids responded, we were able to determine that 16% were experiencing, you know, we picked some of those questions out of the survey that we gave, just give us an idea if it was having a negative impact on them. So we picked themes, and based on the themes and based on the responses, we were able to pull from that 16% of the kids reported that it was having a serious impact on them. And the same with academic difficulties too.
So these percentages are an analysis of comments students made.
Yes.
You guys went through the qualitative comments and said, you know, 17%. I see.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
I see. So the quantitative results from the actual Likert responses are different. Like, what are they different? Do you have different percentages there?
Yes, they are
You
different.
have two different percentages on negative impact based on qualitative and okay.
And correct.
And this is the data I showed you, just a snapshot of in my first few slides about the survey.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue. Those are the results from the high school. Okay, I'm going to move forward. I want to shift gears and talk about the supports that we either are currently providing our kids or intend to provide. So there are two central office-driven supports that we currently have in place. One is what's called the Perseverance Pod. This is a picture of Sean Harrison, our youth safety specialist, and Eric Davis, one of our teacher assistants, staffing the high school cafeteria. We've had 23 kids come up until today when I had to close the school district because of the local infection rates. Kids are provided breakfast, lunch, and they can be brought down to the teen center or the guidance counselors if they need support. I have to give Mike Lassiter a shout out. This really was his baby. Once I put it in his hands, he ran with it, and he was very upset, by the way, when I had to shut down the district this week. He was frantically making calls yesterday to families who were impacted, but we'll get it back up and running as soon as we can. And then I think by now you know that we're just trying to find one at least small way we can encourage kids to practice mindfulness. Right now, 8 students have registered. I saw the borough post on its Facebook site the flyer, so maybe we'll have more folks sign up. That'll be offered once a week. Elizabeth, I want to pass the mic back to you and have you talk about what you're doing on your end.
So what we are doing currently, because of the other reports that we had heard about different schools, different programs, and all over the world with the impact that COVID was having on young people, we have been providing teletherapy for students that need support. We also have in-person counseling, so they can come to the school where I am, or we schedule with them, and then we can also see them online. And that's been working. That's been working very well. We also offered groups like academic engagement, for students that felt disconnected and needed support. Emotional management, executive function for middle school, and also grief and loss for students that may be, grieving the loss of, what normalcy was for them and everything else. So these are some of the groups that we've offered students so far. With the data that we collected, so when school starts again in January or before that, I mean, the mental health support group is going to start in triage. We are going to take a look at the data based on what every student reported, and then we are going to determine what level of service or what level of intervention that we'll be providing for them. So that's the triage part. The virtual hangout, we are also offering virtual hangout for students to come for after school recreation, if they wanted to just hang out with each other virtually, if they just wanted to watch a movie or anything of the sort. We have also been collaborating with staff and parents and guardians about getting referrals, and also reaching out to the students that we are available, and if they want to come see us, that they can always come and see us. This Bright Path app is an app that also when students download it, we are still trying to try it out, but I think it was introduced by University of I think Pittsburgh. So we are trying to download it and see how it works. But apparently what it does is students, so once they have it, they can work with their clinician on what support for them. So it will be like, oh gosh, I can't think of the name. But with this app, they can write what services they need, who they are. The name keeps escaping me. I'm so sorry. So they can write it, and then it will be available for them on their phone, so that when they are in crisis, because for most people, when they are in crisis, they don't remember numbers, they don't remember names, they don't remember certain things. Safety plan, yes.
There you go.
Plan. So what we do with most of our students, we do safety plan with them, where we have a piece of paper, we write all this information on them, what their triggers are, who they need to call if they're in crisis, and what helps them calm down, their reason for wanting to live, and all these things, we write them for them. But in this case, they have it on an app. So since most kids are using their phones, they can have it on their phone. And when they're going through a crisis, all they have to do is just pull their phone, and they can have that information at their fingertips. It also allows students to check in periodically about how they are feeling. So it does their well-being, and on a daily, I think, however we set it up, so that they can check and they can report how they are feeling, to give us a sense of what support they need and when we need to call them and contact them.
At this point, I'd like to open it back up for more questions. I anticipate there are some, so please ask. Mariana, welcome to the meeting.
Hey, Mariana.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
What questions might the members of the board have? Mark, were you raising your hand? No, Marilyn?
Yeah, I'm curious on some of the numbers. Ms. Asimo, when you provide those mental health supports, what kind of numbers are you seeing of students who are willing to join a support group or connect with you in the virtual hangouts? Like, what are we looking at in numbers?
So far it's been very low. Despite many attempts to be in the classrooms, to bombard them with information, it's been very low. So that's where we are. But in terms of seeking therapy, I think we are almost at the same level as we've been around the same time last year.
Meaning students who were accessing therapy before are doing it.
Yes, students that are seeking therapy, yes. And we also have, new students that have signed up and are coming. So looking at the numbers from this year and last year, we are almost at the same level. But with groups, we have less students signing up for group, and even for virtual hangout, less students come in.
Yeah, this is hard to get them to connect even when you're offering all this great stuff. You know,
Yes.
I think that's not surprising. My other question on numbers is there's 23 you said on the perseverance pods. Cute
Yeah.
title. Is that like the max, or is there room for more? They haven't come yet, or what's the number on that?
That's a good question. We're going to shoot for 40. We went slow and identified those kids we know are most in crisis and most in need of some kind of in-person support. And this would have been week 2. We were going to wait until after week 2 to expand the program. We also want to be sure that we are reaching out to some of those kids who we don't have targeted to be in crisis, but who could certainly use a quiet space. I mean, that was one of my takeaways from one of my listening sessions with students, that there were some kids living in homes with siblings, parents who were working from home, guardians were working from home, who were distracted from learning, let alone sharing all that bandwidth. So Mike Lassiter is working on a protocol to allow us to open it up for kids without opening up the box too wide, since we think we can only handle right now 40 students safely. By the way, we're using 2 sides of the gym, and then we're going to open up the 2 small rooms. The 2 small rooms in the cafeteria are going to be used for art and related subjects, since the kids need space to do their work. Monique, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, am I unmuted? Okay, great. Thanks, Ms. Asamoah, for sharing all that information. And it's really, I'm just really, I feel good to hear all the work that you're doing, and not surprised, of course, the services that you're offering to students who, will avail themselves of them. My question more so is to Scott's presentation on, which you may not be able to speak to tonight, but Operation Student Mastery. Are you prepared to answer questions about that tonight? Or are you going to?
I can answer some, sure. I mean, try me and I'll give you what I can.
Okay, I think I'm just trying to understand. I mean, we really don't know anything about it. So I just wanted you to speak to it a little bit more. What does this mean?
Okay.
Student mastery. I get concerned still because we're still in a pandemic. So I just want to know a little bit more about what the expectations are around student mastery.
Yeah, so first of all, what I have tasked Chrissy and Caitlin to do is to create profiles of all the students who failed at least one course in both the middle and high school. They have these massive Excel charts. They're using Google Sheets. And they are having guidance counselors, they themselves as well, Juliana Luxa, call homes, call students to get as much information as they can about their interactions with their teachers, about the reasons why they think that they failed the class. We're actually going to build a profile, an academic profile. We're going to break down the kinds of classes they failed, if they failed more than one. After having a profile, we can then identify the specific supports we need to give these kids. Do we need to get these kids into the perseverance pod? Do these kids need an extra hour after the 4-hour day? They expressed a willingness to get the extra support, but they just didn't know how to get it. Things like that. The other piece here, though, is the how to adapt the system, the grading system in particular, to the conditions. What I can tell you is that I am looking for us to be assured that kids are mastering the curriculum, and then have that mastery, which can be expressed in a number of ways. I'm not going to be looking for kids to come back to a multiple choice test that they may have not performed well on previously. But they have to express mastery in individual ways, which I'll outline. I'll point out exactly the strategies we're going to use to have them show mastery, and then reflect on what should be a more accurate grade that they should have received for the first marking period. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Mastery doesn't mean making up all the work that they missed. I'm sure there are some kids who failed their classes because they fell behind, were overwhelmed, the snowball effect kicked in, or for other reasons. They were taking care of a parent, of a sick parent. I mean, all the reasons that the board identified, the board's aware of, kids are confronting. Does that help you along a little bit, Monique?
Yeah, thanks for the additional information. But I will have to say, I don't know, I just don't take comfort in, as much as I believe in providing supports to students as needed. You know, this is an issue of equity for sure. This just sounds to me like the onus is still on students to make up for system failure of that they are not responsible for. They're not responsible for the fact that they have to learn in a pandemic and still maintain these expectations of mastery of content. How much content are they expected to master in a pandemic? How much, you know, how deep or how vast and broad a breadth, how much breadth are they expected to cover in a pandemic? We're still, I mean, again, I appreciate all the work that you're trying to do. I certainly appreciate and understand what teachers are dealing with, because I am one. But I still feel, from what I'm hearing, everything, not everything, but 80% of this is on, well, how are we going to make sure these students who apparently failed are going to now all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but through our help, become masters at the content. It's not there. We shouldn't be focusing on just what the students need to do when they're not, it's not their problem. It's the system problem. I didn't hear enough of that. I'm sorry. I didn't hear enough of what did we do wrong? What do we need to do differently? And stop swooping down on students and finding ways to fill the gap that they're not responsible for.
Well, in all fairness, Monique, I started my presentation by talking about what we need to do to learn how we may not have been effective. And that's definitely something we need to address. And I don't want you to misinterpret, I don't want anybody on the board to misinterpret student mastery to mean, in my eyes, covering every element of the curriculum. I agree with you that the pandemic changes the nature of how much we expect our kids to be able to know and what skills they have to apply. On the other hand, I have a responsibility to grow these kids academically on some level. I'm not determined on what mastery is going to look like, but I can't leave these kids behind academically. I've got to figure something out, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Scott, I understand. No one, certainly I'm not expecting that. I mean, we all, and maybe, again, I don't want to get caught up in language, but I think first we need a different name and not call this student mastery, but that can be a discussion you can have with your team. But yes, growth, we still want to see growth. But maybe it's just me here. I really need to feel more comfortable as a board member. And I feel like this is a board level issue in terms of what we're prepared to accept, in terms of what administration and leadership is dictating and guiding at this point, whether it becomes a policy issue or not. I feel like I want to have some input into this process of decision making on how we're going to assess, grade, set standards, or an accountability during a pandemic, and what the expectations are for our students. So I would really love to just hear more about this plan and hear it really grounded in what the system can do differently to better support, nurture, move students along that in a way that maintains their keeps them intact, and helps them to grow in many ways through this time period.
On that, we're on the same page. But Darcy, I know you want to say something, but can I just quickly ask if there's anybody who has a question for Elizabeth? If not, I'm going to suggest that she step out if she'd like to.
I just had a quick thought and suggestion. I know that there are probably lots of things that you're doing, Ms. Asamoah, that I would love to try to encourage my girls to do, but I don't know about them. So I was wondering if there could be an effort to reach out directly to parents, because at this point, I think after school hours, a lot of kids are just checking out. They're not reading emails. They're not, again, I hear you that you're going into classes and all those kinds of things, but I think a lot of times without some parental encouragement or even outright, you're going to do this because this would really help you, you might see your numbers greatly increase if you could get the information out directly to parents, and they could know exactly what programs are being offered.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We are going to start doing that. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to have the
Thank
teen center secretary send out information to parents so you know what's available.
Yeah, just
We
like a whole
appreciate that.
laundry list. Because I mean, as parents, we know what our kids are struggling with, right? Where a kid might not be able to identify what they need. If I saw a laundry list of everything that, the teen center is offering, I could be like, oh, look, and you have a little bit of free time from 2 to 3 o'clock, And to me, part of that working with teachers and working with kids,
Yes.
I would even I'd let some kids get out of homework free card for going and doing something with Miss Asamoah in the teen center, right?
Yes.
I mean, if we're going to
Yes.
engage kids in doing something that's going to help their, ability to just get through this,
Yes.
don't
Yes.
do homework this
Yes.
week. Go talk to the folks at the teen center,
Yeah.
That's where I'm with Monique. I don't even want to hear about mastery. I want to hear about a kid making it through this to the other side intact.
Yes.
That's what I
Yeah.
want to hear about.
Thank you. I agree with you, and that's what we are here for. To support the students, to support the community, and so yes, we will send it out. If reaching out to the parents is going to help the students to come out and get the support that they need, we will do that. And as many as come out, we have the capability of working with all of them. So I appreciate that. We'll do that. Thank you so much.
Darcy,
Thank you.
I believe you want to share something about my
Can we let
my
Michelle?
operation, but
Michelle's had her hand up for a while. Should we let her do it? I think Michelle.
yeah, but can I let Elizabeth go, or are we good?
Oh,
you want to?
oh, sorry.
No, I need her.
All right. You know what, Elizabeth, stay. Hunker down.
Okay,
You're
I'll
here.
stay.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't get to hear enough from you, Ms. Asamoah. I love hearing from you because I do know that sometimes we lose sight of what the emotional health is because we're fixated on grading. And as the head of the curriculum committee, I almost feel like we need a pandemic curriculum and we need a non-pandemic curriculum. I truly feel like at this point, we need to have, and I don't know if you agree, but I feel like we need to have some understanding of how much different this environment is. And I know that everyone wants to continue doing what they're doing and make sure the kids are ready for when they get back to in person and ready for things like the real world. Like we talk about these things as if we're not living in the real world right now. Right now I feel like, and I don't know if you agree, the idea of grading is being it's a negative impact on their mental health. Would you agree? The keeping up with everything for fear of not having the best grades to move forward to college, etc.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a concern for most of our kids, especially for students that are not only dealing with the academic, challenges, but challenges from home and other things. I mean, we have kids whose parents are dealing with so much, and so the kids get pulled into that. And I believe the last thing that's on their mind is their math homework or English assignment or anything like that. I mean, if they don't have they're worried about being evicted, if they're worried about not having food to eat, if they're worried about parents leaving and me having to watch my little sibling all day and help them with their homework. They're not thinking about school. And so I think it's very difficult on them. Initially I couldn't understand why. I mean, we knew the students needed help. We knew, we were there, we were ready to work with them. And, it took me a while to understand that, when people are feeling helpless sometimes, it's hard for them to even to go out and seek help. And I think, that's what I'm seeing with some of the kids. I mean, they're in such a state that they don't even feel the need to reach out and get help.
Yeah.
Mark?
Mark?
Oh, sorry, Ann. You're the board president.
No, that's fine. It's your presentation, but then I felt we were going back and forth. Yeah, Mark, I agree. Let's let Mark have his shot and then.
Thank you. So I wanted to respond to Monique. So Monique, after your comments at last week's board meeting, which I took very seriously, and I know Ann took very seriously, we met with Scott, and it was Tuesday or Wednesday, to talk about the student problem. That is to say, all that's being asked for the student in terms of grades, as opposed to having what I might call a minimum mastery of the material, without counting every homework, and the homework has to be on time, and the reports have to be on time, and you have to be in the class on time, and you can't turn off your camera, and all of the other stuff that counts very little, especially in the pandemic, as you presented it, and not giving failing grades. And we spent hours talking about that. No failing grades. And that's the direction which I hope and believe that the task force, the operation is taking. And I believe and hope that's the operation, that's the direction that Scott is taking, that our expectations of the students are not about how many hours and how much work and how many assignments you got in and how did you do on this multiple choice test and this other multiple choice test, but rather, did you get some, I'm going to call it paying attention to the classes. The word, again, I used because of the kind of split in education now between grading and mastery, was mastery. That's probably not, it probably was too strong, and it's honestly not the intention that every student master everything, but rather that we don't look to grades in the pandemic. And that's what you said last week. And I assure you, I took that very seriously and took that very seriously, as did Scott. And that's why we spent a lot of time last week trying to spec it out. And that's it. I continue to take what you took seriously last week, and others on the board said, and I take what you said this week very seriously. We mustn't expect normal performance from our students in these crazy times.
When I hear mastery for this purpose, I'll come back to you, Monique. I mean, what I take from that is, you know, a student gets help and support and is able to show, you know, that they got algebra, that, you know, they learned the basic comments, the basic concepts in algebra, so they can move on to the next class. Not that, I mean, I don't know if that you can respond to that, if that sort of makes sense. Yes.
No, I will wait till you're done. I just wanted to add something to what Mark said before Marty goes, if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. But by mastery, I meant we need, I mean, my expectation is that somebody probably won't pass algebra if they sort of have learned none of algebra, right? I mean, because that would be a disservice to them when they go into algebra 2. So when I talk about mastery, what I'm thinking is that we would help kids get to the point where they're comfortable with the basic concepts of algebra. Right, that's what we would get to. I don't know.
And I'll affirm what you're saying. You've articulated better than I have. I also want to just assure Monique and others that the meetings that Mark, Ann, and I have had since last Monday night resulted in a likely decision I'm going to make about what to do with the F grade, the letter itself, based almost entirely on what Ann and Mark suggested, which I believe is representative for the most part of what the board is looking for as well. I'm just not prepared to go out there and talk about that right now because I want to meet some of my stakeholders first. But I'll assure everybody that by Friday, I'll put that out there. Monique?
Thank you, Scott. Monique?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for that explanation. I actually like where Mark is going in terms of not just looking at the F grade, but all grades. So that hopefully is also on your agenda.
Yes.
And I'm glad that Michelle asked Ms. Asamoah her opinion. I wanted to do that earlier, but didn't want to put you in the middle of this discussion. We've been having a debate, so to speak, if you want to call it that. But I do think your opinion is valued. I mean, this is your area of expertise in terms of, psychological and social emotional well-being. So are you also participating and involved in these will Ms. Asamoah be participating? I guess I should ask Scott.
She will. Yeah, absolutely. And all of those on the team who have some impact on mental health support services, i.e. Susie Boudin and our interim special services person, will have involvement. The managers of the operation, they're really my boots on the ground, doing the grunt work I need them to do to get through the data, look at it, and then have us collaborate on strategies.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just want to make one more quick comment that came to my mind as we were talking about students not your services not necessarily taking off just yet in terms of what's being offered for students. And this is, again, a point I was trying to make last week that I'm not sure if we're giving enough credit to, and yes, we should be doing this, providing opportunities for mental health supports and coming together socially, virtually through the school district. But I don't know if we're giving enough credit and attention to or tapping into what students themselves are doing to get through this period, how they are developing their own ways of coping and relating in their own social circles and so forth. And so how much that piece should be accounted for when we look at numbers or participation rates, that how are, kids getting through that? And I'm sure you probably already have some sense of that, Ms. Asamoah. The students we have here may be able to speak to it. But again, this is about just looking at again, the internal resources that our students have, whether it's getting themselves through social emotionally, but also in somehow preserving their academic growth and what that means to them. So in some way, I think we need to tap into that as well and have a sense of how students are taking that initiative and supporting each other.
Michelle?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Monique for suggesting that, because that really ties in with one thing I wanted to ask Ms. Asamoah, because, my idea for having a pandemic curriculum was not a joke. I really do feel that we need to be different in this different time. And a lot of what we're teaching and learning on the Zoom screen is the same as we did in the classroom. And I think there's a lot more going on that we're not addressing. There's a lot of elephants in the room. One example is just what Monique said, what are kids currently doing to entertain themselves, to exercise, to have social time? So any of those things, I would like to ask you, Ms. Asamoah, can those things be included in a grading system, for lack of a better word, not a grading system, perhaps maybe a participation or something? Can we give children in the district credit for doing those things that are making them feel happy and healthy every day?
I think that would be helpful. I think anything that the kids are doing to, to boost, their mental health, their well-being, it's, we should recognize that. But in terms of how we are going to grade that, I'm not really sure how that's going to be graded. That's not really my area in terms of, grading and things like that. But I
guess
think
that was the wrong, I think that was the wrong term, but my idea was that, grades in the school system as it is, grades are the currency that we use. And can we give some currency to the work that is going on that we don't right now have any value placed on? We have a number for math assignments. We have those percentages like homework, classwork, participation. Why can we not commodify the things that we truly prioritize at this time? And, at this time, we are obviously tasked with prioritizing the mental and emotional health of our students.
Mhm.
And, so that's personally where I feel we should be commodifying in some way, and valuing, for lack of, a better word, but commodifying sounds terrible, but valuing
Mhm.
in some real tangible way. Like, what did you do today that made you feel good, that helped you to feel positive, that helped you calm down, whatever that thing is? Or, I know it's asking a lot of creative, thinking, but I do feel like we need to build that into our system, to value those things that, we talk about being critical, very important things, but they get kind of forgotten. So I didn't want to put you on the spot and ask you about grades, but I just wanted to ask how how important should those things be? You know, how valuable should they be? How can we make that reflected in what we give back on the report cards? Because to me, I shouldn't say this as a board member, but I don't really care what these kids are learning academically. I know they have to be learning something, but I do worry a lot about what they're learning about how our country functions, how safe they are, how we take care of one another, what our community really does in a crisis. Those things are very impactful to children. And so, yeah, I don't think that in 20 years we're going to remember what grades they got. I think we're going to remember what kind of emotional toll this crisis took.
Michelle, is that a
agree.
rhetorical question you're asking, Elizabeth, or is there something to,
No,
I'm not,
no. I mean, I really would like Ms. Asamoah's input. You know, I know it's hard to translate the way that we commodify grading and academic skills, but how, you know, is it possible for us to translate that type of learning, that type of emotional growth into something that we can say, you know, either yes, it did happen, no, it didn't happen, or you have credit for trying, you have credit for keeping your eye on the prize of being positive and, you know, taking good care of yourself.
Michelle, I think that's probably going to be a tough
I don't know if
question,
that's
but
possible.
for
My
Ms.
question
Asamoah,
is it possible?
yeah,
I think that's going to be a really tough question for Ms. Asamoah to answer at a public board meeting. I don't know. I'm a little hesitant to put
yeah,
her on the
I
spot
thank
like
you for
that.
saying that, because
But
I was gonna
I
say
do,
that too.
but I do think I'm so glad you mentioned having Ms. Asamoah being involved, hopefully, with the discussion
Well,
that was
I
going on
think
about
that's
grading,
really what I was trying.
because she can maybe
What
give perspective
I
on these
understand what I'm
things.
saying. It's kind of a Thomas Paine type thing, like boil the babies, whatever. But that's what I'm saying is on purpose a radical
Yeah.
proposal, because I think we need to do something different. And I've been saying that since March.
Yeah.
We cannot continue to do what we've done. This is a completely different environment. And I really see that push, that force to continue on is having detrimental effect. So yes, it's a crazy thing to ask Ms. Asamoah, but I would like us to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
I can assure.
Go ahead,
yes.
Scott. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can assure you, Michelle, as I said earlier to Monique, Elizabeth is going to be at the table with us, poring over the data and helping us correlate the grades. One thing that Mark, Ann, and I discussed was whether or not we should be looking at each individual student's circumstances individually, and then applying different standards according to their needs. There are different opinions about how to go there, right? If we should go there at all. But at the very least, Elizabeth has to be present with the team to say, hey, look, if this particular student has been seeing Dr. Roth on a frequent basis, and Dr. Roth is telling us that this individual has clinical depression, we're going to have to take that into account on some level as having had a detrimental effect on the kid's learning.
Scott, and you know how I feel about that. That we're not going to go through each student who got an F and say, like, did this just a second, Darcy, please, that this child, like, we can assess their particular circumstances, their particular mental health needs. I mean, my impression is my very strong feeling, as you know, I'm just going to say it out, is that there should be no Fs during a pandemic. We have a multitude of issues here. One of the issues is what to do with the Fs that were just handed out. And I feel strongly that those should be withdrawn and students should be given some other opportunity to engage with the material to the extent that we feel that they have passed algebra or that they can move on to the next subject. I don't want to see us trying to figure out, is this using our subjective, views to try to figure out if some student is deserving of not getting an F because she had clinical depression and she knew enough to reach out to Dr. Roth. I just don't think that's workable. I think it puts our teachers and our guidance counselors and Ms. Asamoah and our teen center in an incredibly difficult position, a very judgmental position. I just don't think it should happen. Recognizing that I'm not making the decision, I really hope we won't go that way. Marilyn has had her hand up for a while. Did you want to respond right to that, Darcy? It sounded like you were trying to speak up right at the same moment.
No,
go ahead.
Just out of curiosity.
Hey, Rob. Oh, that was it, Darcy?
No, I have a ton more to say, but you just called on Marilyn, so.
Marilyn, I
No,
think
no, Marilyn
was,
had her hand up for like 5 minutes, but if you had, if you wanted to just follow up on that one.
Fine, Darcy, go ahead. No big deal. I can wait.
No, I don't understand how we're here. Like, at the end of last week's meeting, I felt like I'd been hit upside the head with a brick, right? Like, when the pandemic started at the end of last year, there were no Fs, right? Like, I believe it was agreed universally that that was not going to be done. And I have no idea how we went from that to whatever happened, and then the presentation that we got last week, and then the presentation that we got this week. I don't understand. I don't know if I missed a meeting. I don't know if I missed a memo. I don't know what I missed, right? And then we spent an hour talking about, hey, hold on, Scott, let me just finish. Then we spent an hour and change talking about it last week. I know you guys have had a ton of meetings about it in the interim, but now we're still coming back to talking about the students. It's exactly what Monique said, but I want to just say it again and in maybe even a slightly different way. We're still talking about outputs rather than inputs. We could just as easily go to all those teachers and say, okay, all the teachers who had kids that had failing grades, let's all sit in a room and figure out not just what the students did or what's going on in the students' lives, what was different in your class than was different in the classes where those kids didn't fail. And did those teachers, was it because that kid was different in that class, or that kid likes that class better? Or was it because of some different way that the class was run? Or are those Fs all clustered in particular grades? I don't think we should be talking to the kids at all until that work was done. Don't put anything else on those kids or those families. Like, I'm sorry, I'm starting to feel anxiety about this. These kids and these families have enough on them. And I know the teachers do too. Everybody does. But that's why I don't understand why we're failing at anybody. Everybody's got enough work to do. The teachers have enough work to do. The students have enough work to do. The parents have enough work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Leave the parents alone. Leave the students alone. Give the teachers the permission to assign less. Give the teachers some directives. Let the kids turn off their cameras if they need to. Don't assign so much work. Don't assign asynchronous work. Like, this does not have to be 5,000 data presentations. It seems like there are some really simple solutions here. We prioritize the kids' mental health. We take the grades as much as humanly possible off the table. And we tell the teachers that they don't have to get through some curriculum map, to some, just no to all of it. There are too many.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Darcy, but I disagree with you. I disagree that I want a profile of a child. I want a story of a child. I want to know.
Those teachers should have a pretty darn good story. If you sent my third grade teacher down, my husband, who's a third grade teacher, he could tell you exactly what here's right. And this is the thing that we've talked about with doing, stuff over Zoom. Parents teachers are seeing into kids' households in ways they never have before, and they never should have had to. Those teachers know what's going on with those students. They know if there's a little sibling crawling in that kid's lap so they can't even focus when the class is going on. They know if there's a dad snoring next to them when they're trying to, because the dad just worked all night and the kid can't focus because dad's trying to sleep in the same place they're trying to get their work done. I mean, Scott, you're shaking your head no, but the teachers are seeing.
Because that's not the case at the middle and the high school necessarily. Middle and high schools operate like fiefdoms. Teachers operate in silos. They have at least 100 students. They don't necessarily know what's going on, like a fifth grade teacher knows who has 20 or 30 students.
That doesn't make sense. They're still on Zooms with the kids. They're still seeing into their households. They still know whether those kids have their cameras on. They still know whether those kids are able to come. They still know how much work they assigned compared to
But they don't know if a child is carrying two jobs necessarily, because some kids aren't very comfortable sharing.
Focus on that immediately. I don't think you're putting the onus on the families and on the kids.
It's simply data collection. I'm not putting any onus on them except giving them a voice.
Guys,
Tell us.
As long as we don't go into this thing of trying to have the kids justify their Fs so that they don't get an F. I mean,
No, that's
no,
not what we're trying.
No,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
but we did talk about this a little bit. There's this idea that we would look at each student's profile and figure out if they really, like, why they got the F, and then we would consider changing the grade. I personally would not like to see that happen. You know, I mean, I agree with Darcy too, and Monique and everybody. I hope that we are looking at inputs, outputs, not inputs, like Darcy said last week. I hope that that is something that we are doing. We're figuring out what happened in that class, not just what happened in that kid's life. So that, I mean, that like goes without saying, I hope. Maybe not.
You know,
but second of all, when we go back to the Fs that were already given out, let's not do a psychoanalysis of each kid and see if they can prove their
I
worthiness.
agree with you, Anne.
Okay.
You have to, the board has to understand that I have not given the faculty the courtesy of hearing from me yet
Okay.
what my concerns are about what might be their responsibility in all of this.
Sure.
Tonight was just a way for me to keep you in the loop about where we're heading. I told you I didn't have details, and unfortunately, I believe some of my presentation is being misinterpreted. That's partially my fault for not giving you proper delivery. I would just respectfully ask that the board wait until I can provide you more thorough feedback, and then we can have this discussion again.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Scott.
Monique does have her hand up.
Monique and Marilyn had her hand up like 10 minutes ago, and I cut her off. I sent her to Darcy. Let's have Marilyn go ahead, and then we'll get back to Monique and then Michelle.
My opinion may not be as popular as some others here, but I do believe that we are responsible for student learning. And I don't know, Monique, you had said something about preserving academic growth. I think that is the goal of schools. All the stuff is also important, but I don't think we need students feel good when they learn. So these students are not feeling good about not learning. They're also not feeling good about getting Fs, of course, but they want to learn and they do want to grow. So I think looking at students and seeing individually what's going on and how we can help them is one way to get at this. Like, I think it is a good way. I don't think we're blaming them because they want our help, whether they're showing up for Ms. Asamoah's programs, and they should, or they're showing up to class, they really want to be there. So we need to kind of help them get there. And so holding them, again, I said last week, holding them accountable is not a negative thing to learning, you know, and if they don't accomplish the content, some of the content, that's where the inequity is going to follow them for years. So finding out how we can get them to learn the minimum of what they need to move on is important. And I hope that, I'm sure that's where the leadership team and teachers will go.
I mean, I think the board is in support of having them learn the minimum that goes with these courses. I think the board is not in support of like cutting them off punitively, giving them an F during a pandemic. I mean, let's focus on getting them to learn what they need to learn. Yeah, I mean, I want my kid to learn geometry. My kid, as it happens, just so you know, I'm not being too self-interested here, did not get an F in geometry. But, you know, if he got an F, my concern would be he needs to learn geometry before he goes on to whatever the next thing is, algebra 2 or whatever, to the extent it builds on geometry. But I don't want him getting an F. I really don't. I mean, it's hard. It's hard in this house right now. It's difficult. Everybody's unhappy. You know, please don't give my kid an F. That's the final straw of me trying to get them to do work or trying to encourage them not to like despair about not seeing their friends. Let's, I mean, I do hope, and I think, I don't want to speak for you, Monique, but I do think that we're all in favor of getting the kids to learn in some form. Monique, your hand?
Yeah, I guess I don't know what else to say because I've said it so many times in a couple different ways, but yes, we want to see some student growth, but I think the point I was making too last week is that what lens are we looking at to determine student growth at this time and what that means and how we have to look at that differently. And Scott, I know you said that you didn't want to kind of lay it all out there, but you already basically did in your response to Darcy. You basically told us what you think right now, and that you do think that the direction we should be, or the focus should still be on grading, being able to grade students, or no? Okay, being able to, so the kind of disagreement that you had with Darcy's point about let's take away all this focus on the students and really focus on the inputs. You agree with that? That's where the focus should be.
No, what I disagreed about was what we need look, what information I need at this point, or what directives I have to give going forward. And I heard, maybe I misinterpreted what Darcy said, but what I heard is, don't, the students are already overwhelmed. They don't need a call from the school. They don't need to be speaking about what their needs are. We need to have the educators adjust accordingly. And my approach is, at some point, yeah, I'm going to have to direct our faculty to change their practices, but I'm not prepared to do that until I know enough about what our students are confronting who failed those classes. So that's why I want to develop profiles of those kids and get their backstories more.
Again, and I'm going to have to strongly disagree with that approach too. And I really think that this needs to continue to be a board level discussion. We need to be kept apprised every step along the way as to what sorts of decisions are being made and thought through. And I literally just lost my train of thought. So I'm gonna have to leave it there, but I do want to express my strong standing by what I've said earlier, what Darcy has said, and that we really need to keep, and Mark as well, I think it was also saying that we have to really look at the inputs. And I want to know, this is my question, I want to know, Scott, are you going to be willing to put down these, guidelines, what the expectations are for those inputs, like as soon as possible? And that's the part that we're just not hearing enough of.
Okay. I feel a sense of urgency. 7 days, though, is not enough for me to give you time for me to make those, to settle those directives yet, but they will be happening very soon. And I feel that urgency too.
Some of this we thought was already on the table. Like we thought, teachers have already been directed to not penalize students for turning their videos off. I mean, the board is to some extent surprised because we felt like we had that conversation already. And we thought we'd already sort of talked in general, general terms about not penalizing kids strictly for late work during a pandemic.
I did previously, and now I have to do it again.
So, okay.
With our staff.
I think it was Michelle was up, and then Darcy, and then maybe we could wrap it up, recognizing that this is a discussion that has to continue, but just to sort of get on to our board committee reports. Michelle, go ahead.
I just want to say, I'm sorry, but the repercussions of years to come of this, academic equity issue is something that I think is still not necessarily what we need to be focused on right now. We're focusing on getting students through a pandemic, again, as intact as possible. We can we can cover some lost ground, but we can also preserve students and also recognize where they are learning right now and how we can exploit that in the classroom. That's what we really should be talking about. And that to me will have way more value and will overwhelm any sort of standardized academic growth that we expect during this time.
Michelle?
So I have two things. First question, I hope is a quick answer. Darcy asked that, did she miss anything concerning a change in grades, policy or anything? Not at the board level, as far as I know. I am as confused as you are about when things changed, because I did think that we were still reserving failures, that we were not measuring by pre-pandemic standards. So that is also, I think, still a question that needs to be answered. So I would appreciate an answer to that. And secondly, I would say that what we are teaching our kids in continuing what we have done in the past, just in a virtual sense, is that nothing else, about what the world throws at you matters. That there is a certain amount of just, I don't know, insensitivity to what's happening in trying to recreate the school experience virtually. And I think that is really having an impact on the children. So, more than anything in your presentation, Scott, I noticed that the social aspect was the most impacted, that students were saying that they thought that was kind of the worst effect in the pandemic. And I was very happy and surprised to see that some kids are thinking, this is fantastic. If people leave me alone, I can do my work on my own time, you know. The pandemic is actually helpful to me. I'm going to stop my video because I think my connection is bad. But anyway, you know, in the tradition of putting Ms. Asamoah on the spot, you know, if she would, no, I wanted to ask if she would please come back to give us any kind of advice on this topic.
Yes.
As a board. I would really love for your advice direct from yourself to the board without filtering through anyone else, because I do feel like we're missing something. And we are continuing to push for academic standards when the universe doesn't care about academic standards right now. Okay, this is kind of fruity sounding, I understand, but we are not dealing with, you know, kids getting into college right now. We are dealing with kids who are dropping out of college because they cannot go in person. Like my daughter, for example, is staying home. She's not attending college. We're not spending $15,000 for a Zoom class. I think we are not alone. You know, things are different. And so I just don't understand how we're not responding differently when things are so different. And it is very frustrating. And I apologize for sounding so frustrated, but I do want Ms. Asamoah to come back and give us advice directly. I feel like we need it.
We haven't responded the same way we responded in the spring. We may not have responded as drastically different as you would like. And perhaps we needed to, but we're going to learn from our experience in the last 3 months. In terms of Ms. Asamoah coming back.
But I'm sorry, Scott, we have not responded in a way that I see is so drastically different. We have done a pretty good job of recreating what we had before, you know, academically. I don't think that we have thought very creatively about, you know, what we need to do, what we are being called to do. We are continuing to do the same things. And I don't think that we're being successful at it. I just don't. And so I don't know how better to express.
I think we have a lot of thinking to do. And I agree with you to an extent. I do want to give a shout out to some of our teachers who have really, really run with it. I know, for example, the gym teachers in the high school. I mean, you know, as a kid who hated gym, this was never my subject, but they have been wonderful about encouraging kids to get outside and do other things and report back on what they're doing. You know, the sort of idea, it's a very sort of simple idea of pick up on what you guys were saying about exploiting what kids like to do, how kids are helping themselves. I mean, that's something our gym teachers are doing in the high school, which is just fantastic. Maybe it's the middle school. I don't remember which kid was involved. And the art teacher as well. Art in the high school has been wonderful. Oh no, in the middle school, I'm sorry. I'm forgetting who's who. There's been a lot of flexibility and a lot of attempt to let kids go on their own and, you know, make use of their independent time. But I agree, there needs to be more, for sure. Absolutely, for sure.
There's been a whole paradigm shift in the way teachers are teaching right now. You might, Michelle, do you recognize the fact that we are currently?
When I say we, I'm talking about the board and yourself, Scott. I'm not talking about the teachers. I think the teachers are, from everything I'm hearing, the majority of teachers have been very understanding, very sensitive. I don't feel like we have done enough. I do feel like we have to think about having a separate curriculum for pandemic time. This is kind of crazy that we still have these same standards that we had previous to this pandemic. We can't do it.
Well, I need to clarify that what you said is that the teachers, and I appreciate you saying it, have been very supportive and hardworking. What you missed is that they've been very willing to change the way they approach instruction. And I need to make that loud and clear.
I am in no way criticizing the teachers. I feel like, you know, we have not been given guidance from the state level, but similarly, you know, we have not been giving the guidance to the teachers have been, I feel the teachers have been really making up stuff from scratch in order to get what they need to get done. What I'm asking is that we change the list of what needs to get done. That's what I'm saying.
Darcy, did you want to follow up?
I'll just be really quick. Because I feel like I asked it in a very passionate way. Michelle asked it very calmly, but then went on with other points. We still don't understand how we got here. How did we go from the board being in the loop in a decision at the end of last year that there were not going to be failing grades, to a complete change in protocol this year with no notice to the board or the public.
Darcy, I do think we actually did give out Fs last semester, and that was our bad, probably, now that I've thought about it some more. But I believe in the middle
we
school, high
did.
school,
Some things
I
were-
believe, yes, I believe we had a pass-fail regimen, at least in the high school, and some Fs were given out. I mean,
But it was,
there was also an issue with certain Fs potentially having been given out, mistakenly, not consistently with a policy that concerned, how students were doing before the pandemic started. And so there was a lot of confusion about that. But I believe that, at least in theory, we were giving out Fs. And as I think about it now, I hadn't really reflected on that. I'm not proud of that, if in fact I'm correct that we gave them. So that may be part of our disconnect. What?
that was not my recollection from the last quarter. I thought there was very much a discussion about taking that off the table, that kids were not going to be failed during remote instruction.
My memory is that there was a policy of not giving people an F if they weren't already failing when the pandemic hit. Maybe that was for one of the quarters and not for the other. But I remember we had some discussions about whether some children, in fact, had been given an F, even though they had not already been failing. And so some grades had to be changed, but there was an underlying practice, I believe, and Scott can correct us next meeting. Perhaps I'm wrong, but for all the discussions we had about having to change certain Fs, that led me to believe that we were, in fact, assuming that some Fs were justified. When I say we, I mean the district as a whole. So I think there's been some confusion around that too.
Okay. And then my other point was, if I'm talking about not going to students first and going to teachers first and looking at inputs as opposed to outputs, that's not casting blame. That's not casting aspersions. That's not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. That's just where you put your focus, right? And this is what teachers do all the time. Teachers reflect on their practice. Teachers are observed multiple times a year. It should not be anything new to any teacher to reflect on their practice. And I know teachers do on a regular basis. So my suggestion is not to say teachers aren't being flexible enough, or teachers aren't doing this, or making any general assumptions about teachers. But in the same light, I don't think we can make general assumptions about students, that they're failing because of any of the, numerous reasons that we may have, suggested today. There could be a bajillion reasons. Mm-hmm. And to pretend we can go out to students and we can be like, oh, you failed because of this. Oh, you failed because of that. We'd actually, I think, be far more successful to look at what we're doing as opposed to what they're doing. Just like when you want to solve a problem in your own life, right? You should look internally, not externally. Don't look at what everybody around you is doing. What are you doing and how can you change what you do, right? So Scott, I feel like you get a little defensive about it in terms of like that we're saying something about the teachers or we're saying something about the administration. No, let's clean up our own house first, make sure we're doing exactly what we want to be doing. We're all on the same page. All the teachers are trying to start from the same basic place and the same basic understanding and the same basic philosophy. And then maybe the things that are happening with the kids will change, right? If we change our practice, maybe their response will be different. I'm saying we start cleaning up in our own backyard.
Okay. More to discuss.
And that concludes my report for now. Elizabeth, thank you for being here and spending the time with us.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, seeing that we have a number of members of the public here, at this time, I'd like to move that we have an extra public comment session starting now, lasting for no more than 30 minutes, with each commenter capped at approximately 3 minutes. Is there a second?
Can I make a suggestion? Instead of adding one, can we just move the first one here instead of adding a third? Because typically what I think is when we move to the first one, then we don't really even have anybody for the second or the third. So
right, let's move the final one here. I'd like to have public comment before the vote. So let's change let me amend that motion. I move we have a public comment session now, another one after our agenda discussion and before our vote, and then none at the end of the meeting.
I'll second.
Second that? Okay. Could we have a vote by acclamation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone not in favor who wishes to be heard? No. Okay. All right, members of the public, the Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board policies 164 and 167 establish and regulate the right of the public to participate in public meetings. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your blue hand or wave your hand at the camera. And please don't forget to say your name and your address when you get up to speak. I'll give everybody a minute to get organized. All right, having taken a minute to have a lengthy drink and seeing no public comments at this time, let's go on to our board action items. Michelle, could you go over the curriculum for us, please?
Yes,
Thanks.
I just need a minute to switch around my screen. Sorry. Okay, so tonight's agenda has an addition in the approval of field trip requests. So last week there was just one. It was a virtual field trip for the high school biology class with Miss Stephen. This now new amended field trip request is another for Miss Anand in the middle school for the Science Bowl, I believe. And that is the entire report from curriculum and instruction.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any comments or questions for Michelle? All right, Mark, would you take us through finance and facilities, please? Where's Mark? Do we lose Mark? I think we lost Mark for the moment. I'm sure he'll be back. Oh no, I see him now. He may have stepped away. Let's skip him for now and go on. Oh, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry.
All right. No, go for it, Mark. I was just going to interrupt with personnel. Go for it.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine.
I thought there might be a couple of minute break there for me to.
Oh, sorry. Should we
Okay,
take
sorry,
a
Mark.
I'm good. I'm good.
Anybody
I heard
like it?
the name and I came running back. Okay, I'm here. Okay, so finance. So we have a few new items to go over. Number 2 is the approval of the athletic bill list for December 1st through December 15th. Number 4 is the cafeteria bill list for November 22nd to December 4th. In item number 6, we have the addition of the kinetics, personal training, and group fitness for our students for the rest of the year, really, for a cost of $2,300, which is wonderful, and I hope the students take advantage. It probably will be great, surely will be great. Item 11 is the approval to submit an application for the school security grant. And this is a grant in the amount of $87,823 from the Department of Education to be used to further upgrade the security systems across the school district, things like cameras, swipe cards, etc. Item 12 is approval of bedside instruction for one student at Rutgers Behavioral Healthcare Center in Piscataway. Items 13 through 16 are roof repair quotes. So we need repairs at both Irving and Bartle. We've taken bids. Numbers 13 and 15 are taking bids, and numbers 14 and 16 are approving the contracts with Northeast Roof Maintenance of Perth Amboy, who we have used before successfully, for $4,600 in the first case and $2,800 in the second case. And those are all of the new items. I did want to report, I came running in here when I heard my name, but I did want to report on our finance committee meeting very briefly. We did review, and we met before the meeting this evening. We did review charter school costs, which are likely going to be slightly lower this year due to the number of students who live in Highland Park going to charter schools in the area. And budgeted lower, but we may even save money in that account. We talked about roofs. And in fact, capital improvements and our long-term capital plan. The roofs are being fixed and will be fixed successfully. But especially at Irving in the middle school and high school, these fixes to the roofs are short term, and we need to do something more long term. And so we're just starting to look at the long term plan and how we can fit that in, along with discussions that are continuing about the track and field, and what are we going to do about that. That requires the assistance of the county and the town, because the track and field are a shared facility with them. And then we discussed policies that relate to finance, and talked for just a very few minutes about moving forward with those. So there are very likely in January, there'll be policies relating to finance, a number of them appearing on the agenda as we move through and get completely current with the policies that the board needs to commit to. And so that's what we discussed.
Thank
and
you.
I'll be sending minutes out tomorrow.
Thanks so much. Any
Welcome.
questions for Mark, board members?
Anne, you're muted.
Thank you so much. All right, personnel. Discussed the meeting last week. Everything is pretty self-explanatory. There's a change in date on number 3. On number 8, we have a new para coming on. Welcome. Number 15, I'm going to go back to number 15 because that's something we might want to spend a little more time on. Number 17, a substitute paraprofessional job coach. Number 18, staff to run a kickball event at the middle school. Okay, number 15 is Schedule B appointments. These are, let's see. I'm sorry, I skipped 16. 16 is toileting stipends for paras who deal with children who have toileting needs. That's pursuant to the union contract. 15 is Schedule B appointments. They're for winter coaching. So the state of New Jersey has approved winter sports to begin in mid-January sometime. And Scott, does that include indoor winter sports or just outdoor winter sports?
All winter sports.
Okay, so we don't know if that's actually going to happen, but that's the
intent right now of NJSIAA.
The supposition. Scott, I had thought that things like kickball would be included on the winter sports stipends since winter sports has been shortened. Why is there a separate item for that?
Yeah,
That's confusing to me.
That is going to end up being for the English language learner students. I put a call. Yeah, I put a call. I should have clarified to the personnel committee earlier. Forgive me. I put a call out to anybody who wants, any faculty member who would be willing to run an outdoor activity just for fun, get the kids out and interacting with each other. One person did get back to me, and that's our new ESL teacher at the middle school. She's a part-time teacher.
Thank you.
And she thought it would be very helpful for the ESL students to, ELLs to interact with each other, be able to verbally speak with each other around something fun.
Yes.
So that's separate from sports.
That's fantastic.
All
right, so I need to start. So Scott, are these the full amounts of the normal winter sports?
Correct.
Okay, so I need to apologize to the board here. I think Scott and I are feeling regretful that we did not do a better job of sharing stuff with the board earlier on. My thought, and a thought I think Mark had agreed with, was to try to get some kind of outdoor winter informal sports program going once we again delayed re-entry at the middle school and high school. We discussed this at great detail. Our experience has been, as Amoa said, that it's very hard to get kids to participate in mental health groups. Hopefully now that parents will be involved, we'll have some more participation. But one thing that kids like to do is socialize in person. So perhaps we could have some outdoor sporting type activities to get kids involved and take some of the mental health burden off of some of the kids who might enjoy this kind of thing. And I feel very strongly we need to do something like that. I understand that there is some concern about the amounts of the stipends since official winter sports won't be beginning until January, if then. They normally start, after Thanksgiving? So there's a pause in our winter sports coaching responsibilities. My hope was that that pause would be filled in for the most part by outdoor winter activities open to all students. So I don't know if board members want to ask questions about that or just express their concerns.
I'll just add, Ann, that every one of these coaches will be expected, if the board approves their stipends, to do two things: conduct both virtual and outdoor activities for conditioning, preparation for winter, exercises outdoors, indoors only if there's severe inclement weather, 10 degree temps, a blizzard like Wednesday. And also,
Even Scott, even then, I mean, we're not going to have any indoor activities until January, right? I mean,
no, correct.
Blizzard later on.
Either
Okay.
outdoors or virtual. And they would also be expected to organize students who participate in intramural activities. We reviewed the NJSIA regs on running intramurals during the school year and found activities such as flag football that we could run alongside the conditioning. The whole idea, as Ann pointed out, just to get the kids outside and interacting.
There is a little bit of a risk that no kids will show up. And then, we find ourselves in a position of paying money, to coaches, perhaps without kids showing up. And that's a real concern. And I think at least one other board member has expressed the concern that, they spoke with their parent friends who said that kids would definitely not show up for this. I've spoken to my parent friends who said, their sports loving kids will show up for this. So it's a little hard to know. Ideally, we would have done like a well responded to survey before we did this, but we didn't. And truthfully, it is hard to get a good response rate for surveys like that. So I'm not sure it would have been successful. So anyway, that's what's being proposed. Rob Magazine and Mark, I think, were wanting to comment. Go ahead.
Well, so first of all, there are no outdoor, traditionally, there are no outdoor winter sports, right?
Right.
Not,
wait,
correct.
I don't know. Is that correct?
Winter track.
No, winter track is indoors.
Okay. Yeah, right.
They do practice on the track when they can outdoors, but
okay,
the competitions are all
We
in.
were told it was outdoors, so sorry I said that.
The basketball court does have doors to the outside.
Yes.
Would you consider using the basketball court at the high school for basketball practice with the doors open? It would be nicely ventilated.
Probably not before
Actually,
NJISAA allows it, right? I mean,
I don't think they cover occupancy rules. They cover competition and
okay.
training. But Rob, we were thinking more so to use the Donaldson Park courts that are popular with our students. Our coaches do take teams down there for tennis, cross country. So would be a new practice if we relocated. I'm not sure.
I just don't see that. I'm curious. I mean, I don't see this as an actual plan. I see this as an idea. So to be asked to approve money to be kind of spent in a fuzzy way, and I'm all about sports, and I want there to be sports, but I just don't know what the plan is.
I hear you on that.
So
if the board would like, I can prepare a very detailed overview that includes what conditioning would be, what each coach would do. I did have Craig through me present to the personnel committee a description of what winter conditioning looks like, but it was general, and what intramurals we would run. But if the full board would like a breakdown per coach, I can make that happen.
I mean, the biggest thing for our students is beyond the sports teams is to provide activities for them to do in small or medium or safe groups outside, and that could have been going on all year since the beginning.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, of course.
So that's a little bit of a frustration. So this is getting kind of thrown on top of something that we really didn't put this together as a plan.
We're thinking of running it like we did the fall sports that were conducted outdoors, soccer, albeit with different activities in mind.
So what are the sixth, 7th, 8th, 9th? What are they all doing?
They would work with the coaches. the middle school, we have middle school and high school coaches listed on this agenda. So middle school coaches would mirror what the high school coaches are doing.
But again, I'm talking about all the kids, not the teams.
This would be open
Oh.
to everybody. Scott, am I
Yes.
correct? This intramural aspect of
Yes, you're
this would be
correct. It would be open to everyone. Intramurals are everybody, not
So,
just the athletes.
okay, so do the families know about this?
Not yet, because we just are sort of lurching
Yeah.
toward a plan. I mean, I certainly we should have done more earlier, but
It
we
feels
didn't.
a little disorganized to
And
me.
here
I'm
we are.
sorry.
Yes, no, it
does.
is.
It really
It is.
does.
So the question, I mean, it has been. The question I think is, do we want to approve it now or do we want to, I think we have Mark, then Monique, then Darcy. Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we've overcome a number of obstacles to try to make this happen. And in the interest of getting the students who are on teams out with their coaches and students who aren't on teams out with the coaches to do either conditioning or intramural sports. And it just seems like, as you said, Rob, the least we could do. I agree, we should have been doing this much longer. And if it is seeming disorganized, I think it's because it's just taken this long to try to make it happen. So
I feel a little frustrated. I'm not going to vote against doing it because I feel like it's an important thing to do. I'm expressing an additional frustration on top of the 45 minutes of frustrations that we all talked about the other stuff, which was all valid. And I probably would have said, not quite as eloquently as you all did, but I'm supportive. But to me, this is a really important thing to get our kids as much as we can active and social and doing things, that are a little bit more normal than what they've had. It's important.
And I couldn't agree more. And that's why a lot of energy went into trying to make this happen. So from that perspective, I support doing it. And it's not about the coaches, it's about the kids, and the coaches are willing to do it. And I'd be willing to pay them their usual stipends for being out there with the kids in the cold. And then when and if we are able to go inside or do some sports outside, do those things.
Yeah, agreed. I'm recognizing we should have started earlier. I had Darcy and Monique, and now I've actually forgotten who was first, and then Michelle.
She's to the right of me on my screen.
Oh, she's above you.
So let me lower my hand. I think my question is, just the plan, and then what would be the contingency plans for because everything there's so much that is fluid, obviously, in this pandemic that we're living in. So what happens if we get to January and you can't do what you would hope to be able to do with the students? I'm just wondering what happens. What are the contingency plans put in place? I don't even
NJ
plan without the contingency plans, but I feel like I need to know both.
So if NJSIAA cancels winter sports, is your question? Like, what do we do then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you. That's one of the issues. What if they cancel winter sports, or what if, right?
So we would continue winter training with the kids, both virtual and outdoors, and we continue intramurals. Now, granted, they might be paid more than they would have had we simply paid them to run intramurals and conditioning. Because remember, these stipends are compensation for competition as well. They travel, they're at night. I understand that. I could renegotiate the compensation if the board was concerned about how much we're spending.
So
but that will be the plan.
And then I guess if you move to the remote context, then of course we have to be concerned about participation. Obviously the incentive is going to go way down, I would think, for many students, especially the non-athletes, so to speak, to participating in the program, if indeed it has to be virtual.
We're expecting it would be outdoors, even if NJISAA cancels indoor sports.
Correct.
I mean, the question is participation. There's people who don't like the cold. There's other people who want to be outside.
Sure, I mean, yeah, that's.
But there's a lot of people that will be out for any reason at all. It's not for everybody, and it's not, but it's something that will give some handful of students an opportunity to be out and social. Was the thought.
So
Darcy?
that's my issue, is I don't understand what we're being asked to approve. Are we being asked to approve what would be a standard length of a Schedule B contract for, I'm just going to pick one at random, a wrestling coach, right? Those are all based on, I believe, right? Those figures were based on a number of hours and the games and the travel and the this and the that and the other, right? It seems highly unlikely that there is going to be indoor wrestling in January. Like, that just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So what are we saying are the expectations of the teachers that are being approved for these Schedule Bs in that case?
Scott, have you
So
set
wrestling-
out expected hours and stuff like that for our
Yes.
teachers? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
so if coaches put in an hour to 2 hours on a regular training day, I'd expect they'd be putting it in that same time, continuing to train, again, either virtually, depending on the weather, or outdoors. And that could also include intramural activities. Wrestling is supposed to be.
What does that mean? Everybody keeps saying intramural activities, but I don't know what you mean by that.
Flag football,
but so
ultimate
we're
frisbee.
asking every single one of these teachers to also run an intramural? That's what I don't understand the plan. Like, the plan hasn't been fleshed out.
I mean, they're not going to be, I mean, there'll be a lot of time. Scott, will they be doing sort of like indoor virtual conditioning in addition to this other stuff? I pictured this as they'll be doing outdoor conditioning for their teams and intramural activities that's open to everyone, whether it's formal. I mean, I think at this point we're getting a little late for formal intramurals where people sign up on a team, and one team is called the June Bugs and one called, but setting up at least informal soccer games, informal flag football games.
And I've directed Craig, the coordinator, to have each one of these teachers do all of those things.
Okay.
So in the case of, let's say, basketball, you have an assistant coach and a regular coach. Those two coaches would team up, work with 10, 15 kids, conditioning outdoors. That could be track work, that could be using the basketball courts on, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday, running intramurals, depending on how they want to operate it. But every day they'd be expected to perform their duties as coaches. By now focusing more on exercise conditioning and just informal competition. The only difference here is that what we're saying is these coaches are not going to be attending games because games aren't being run. On the other hand, I should add, the season, if it does kick off, and by the way, wrestling doesn't start till March. I suppose the hope there is that things will die down enough that we can actually do some kind of indoor wrestling competition. The majority of the winter season, because they've delayed it, even though it butts up against the spring season, is still going to happen. I think they're losing about a week of competition. So if it does happen, these coaches will actually be working more time than they would have, somewhat, right? Because they're working now and then into the extended season.
But are we really thinking that kids are going to be outdoors for 2 hours in the middle of the winter to do conditioning?
We're hoping that they'll be there to if the conditioning is really boring, if it's like all HIIT workouts and
here, let me just one of my kids, their major distress is losing their sport, right? That they do year long. Like, that's the major source of stress. So I love this idea, right? Like, I think we need to get the kids involved in this kind of stuff, but this just isn't fleshed out. Like, I just don't see how kids are going to be out. Like, her gymnastics is now doing just conditioning, right? So they went from 3-hour gymnastics practices in a gym to 45-minute Zooms, right? And even when they were still doing indoor, like the sparse kind of indoor they could do with all the regulations and this percentage of indoor or whatever, it still went down to 2 hours. It doesn't seem realistic to say we're going to put in the same number of hours with an outdoor winter program than we would do with an indoor winter program. It just
if you add the intramurals, it might work out that way. I mean, I agree. We can't sort of guarantee they'll be spending exactly the same number of hours, but if you do conditioning for the sports that they're formally assigned to, plus intramurals.
Like you said, the intramurals are kind of like a hope, right? We're not even
but
wait, hold on. We're being asked to vote on this, but we don't even know what the intramurals are. We don't know if there's an interest in them. We don't know anything. So I'm just saying we're being asked to take like a $65,000 leap of faith.
Well, some of
Well-
that, I mean, not the whole $65,000. I assume the board would probably be willing to pay some fraction of it for the coaches to do conditioning with the sports that they're assigned to.
Absolutely.
But, so it's not the whole 65 grand that we're asking.
No, but
Um,
I hope that would be like, here's what's a realistic expectation, right? Like my daughter's thing went from, 9 hours a week to like 2 hours and change a week. That's a big change, right?
Right,
Because
right.
coaches can't, and they're still doing it just on Zoom in their houses, not outside in the freezing cold.
Well, the hope is it would
But
take up
there's-
more time if, with the intramurals. It's not going to be 45 minutes. I mean, it is a risk. You're right. Maybe no one will show up. Maybe it's just my kids and their soccer buddies who will show up, and that.
It's not a whole lot different than the risk the board takes in July or June when it approves coaches' stipends for the fall. And then we come to the fall and find out we can't run a football program, or we can only run a football program with half the number of games on the slate because not enough kids showed up.
No, I mean, I disagree. I mean, that we know what we're approving. We're approving a football program. And then if we don't have enough kids, then we don't run it. And then we don't pay for the whole thing. Like this is kind of
What
like.
would you want to, what could I provide the board if it were to table the motion? Let's just say, what could I provide the board? Be concrete. I'll
what the
gladly provide it.
intramurals are, what each coach is going to be doing for intramurals, a vague expectation of, we hope 5 kids would show up, or we hope 20 kids would show up. And, what's going to happen, like what we realistically think is actually going to happen with these programs, if they are able to run, and what's going to happen if they can't run at all, is it the same?
Sorry. What are the contingency plans? If they can't.
I mean, if nobody
Of course,
shows up,
this time we have to have another plan.
you mean if nobody shows up for the outdoor things? I mean, I agree that NJISA may cancel, and what may mean that like coaches, as to the teams they're assigned to, are only doing sort of part-time workouts, conditioning. They might wind up working many fewer hours. But I mean, the hope is that we will do the outdoor stuff, and there will be some kids, with a concerted recruitment from the school that will participate in the outdoor things.
But I just want to say, yes, we hope there are some kids that show up, but how are we supposed to make the determination that this is worth it? I mean, are we willing to pay this much money for 5 kids to show up to do conditioning? Or, I mean, that's what I think what I hear is, how can we make this decision when we don't know how much it's worth? And to that point, how are we getting the word out about these intramurals?
I assume that would be the usual enthusiastic means, Scott, people coming into classes, emails to parents, blasts out to students, because obviously this is really important. We haven't done anything yet. We haven't done anything yet because it's still.
I also want to ask if this is in any way being organized in tandem with Highland Park Rec.
Not at this time, no. The idea was to try to get something going ASAP, to give the kids some kind of outdoor social emotional outlet
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Here's what would have made sense to me is if it was presented in, we're going to pay these teachers X amount to run an intramural program 3 hours a week or whatever at 48, whatever, an hour. And then the teachers regular stipends for their programs at whatever percentage that they can actually do it, right? So say if again, I'll just go back to wrestling just because whatever, that's the one I picked. If they would normally practice 12 hours a week or something, but they're only actually able to practice 4 hours a week and there are no games, then those stipends are adjusted accordingly, right? So we know what we're paying for, we know what we're paying for whatever intramurals are. I mean, here we're not even being told what the intramurals are, so it's really hard to make a decision.
Sorry. Says Darcy, that would likely require an HPEA sidebar, because what we'd be doing is changing the terms of the work conditions. We'd be changing the stipend amount.
But how does what you're proposing not require that? Because these stipends are for coaching these sports. We're asking them to do something totally different. So
there's an informal agreement to that effect, is what I understand. I'm not sure we'll get to an informal agreement on reducing the stipends. It's possible. but it's
we're
not
not
going to happen before
approving-
school goes back.
What I'm pointing out is we're not approving those agreements. What we're
That's true.
approving
You're right.
is head girls basketball coach. So I don't
Right.
know how the board can approve a head girls basketball coach, and then all of a sudden that person's actually doing intramurals. And then what happens if somebody gets hurt during those intramurals, but the board has never even approved that intramural? Like
Do we have to approve? Like, I mean, this is like after school stuff. It's not going to be sort of a formal. I mean, like, for example, we're organizing a kickball team for the middle school. I mean,
we're approving it.
right, I know, but there are all kinds of things like that happen that we don't approve. We have games after
Right.
school. We have activities after school. The board doesn't weigh in on each of those. I mean, I get what you're saying. I wish that I had gone back and said, Scott, this is what we need to do. We need to list the hours everybody's going to spend on kickball. At the same time, it got to, well, you know, it is what it is. This is where we are. I think if we want to do this before the high school, middle school open again, we have to vote now, or we can table it and put it off.
We could do a quick, I mean, if we really want to do it and Scott can put together something that makes sense and we can know what we're approving, we could do a special meeting if we want to. If
Yeah,
the
that's
school
true.
stuff
Yeah,
and
sure.
whatever. I mean, I'd be totally down for that because I do
Okay.
agree we need to get the kids out there. But it just doesn't
Well,
seem reasonable to approve something when we're not approving what we're actually approving. I want to.
We have a,
We do approve all those Schedule B positions for all of those after school activities. So we do approve all those things. And
the board
I
can take
feel like my
action
kids
on
have been to
Jan-
some activities that have not been specifically approved, but all right.
well, but then
The
a lot
board can
of
take-
times teachers run things that the board's not paying for. They run them for a few years and then they
Okay.
get enough interest and then the board pays for them and it turns into a Schedule B position. So there
Okay.
are a lot of those things that kids participate in. But if
Okay.
teachers are going to be being paid for something, we should know what that is.
Okay.
The board can take action on January 4th, which would give us enough time to start the program. Obviously, I would email the full board with the details that I'll be collecting and get at least a straw poll idea if there's either positive interest so that I could prepare for the launch of something January 5th if the board approves the resolution on the 4th. So I don't know if a special meeting is necessary.
That sounds reasonable. We have a lot of other commenters coming up, but that does sound like a reasonable idea to have you put together a proposal. We vote on the 4th. You're taking the risk that some board members might not like the proposal, but you know, faculty understand that. They've been doing this for a while. There's always that risk. And faculty will have to do some work to, you know, plan this, taking the risk that, you know, they might not get paid. But that's, again, I think inherent in the nature of being a public school teacher. All right, please raise your hands. I see Mark's hand is up. Was there anybody else that I skipped? Because I just can't remember.
Were you wanting to talk, Chris? I saw your
Oh,
hand.
I was just going to ask, what are the possible start dates for the intramural program? Like, were you thinking that, you know, it would start this week if we approved it, or were you thinking that it would start January 15th, or what were you thinking?
The 21st.
Right.
January 21st. I'm sorry, December 21st, next
right.
Monday.
Before the holidays, albeit just a little before the holidays.
Yeah.
So so tabling it would delay it, but not by very much.
Not by
That's true.
much.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
And I feel,
Mark.
I just wanted to say, I very much want us to do this and take the chance, but I also think the board deserves more detail and it wasn't well presented. Part of that is it took a very long time to get this kind of fleshed out. And we do have, I believe, Scott, we have an agreement with the HPEA to run this in this kind of mixed way that's not in the contract. I think if we would approve something that didn't look like this piece of paper, but look, you know, which has that resolution on it, but approved something that said what we were really approving, as Darcy said, I hope the board would be willing to take a chance on it. And just, I don't want to get into long discussions about this, so maybe I shouldn't bring it up, but we have, when presented well to us in advance, we have approved programs like the football program where we didn't know if we had enough kids to play, and where we ended up in situations where very few games were played, and where, if you know, you count all of the hours and the competition and everything else, perhaps we were approving something that wasn't actually done. So I'm willing to take a chance on this money and get the kids out there. And I actually feel strongly we should, but let's get it in a form, Scott, January 4th or whatever, I think it's the 4th, that we can.
January 4th.
If everyone agrees with that.
Could I just
Mark,
thank
Mark, what do you think? Mark, what do you think? I'm sorry, it's Chris. What do you think about that requiring a new sidebar with HPEA to sort of explain this differently?
No, I mean, if we pay a full amount and take
Okay.
the chance that between the intramurals and the conditioning, and hopefully some sports come back, you know, sometime in January, February, March, that we're getting our money's worth. And I would
Okay.
be willing to take that chance, and then we don't need a sidebar.
Okay. Chris.
I just want to thank Scott and Ann and Mark for working on this, because, you know, we've been discussing this in the personnel committee for a long time. It just turned out there were a ton of complications, and thank you guys for spending time trying to make this happen.
Thanks.
Likewise to you. You've had excellent input the whole way through. Okay. Any other comments on personnel? Now, are we at policy before equity? I didn't change equity again. I'm sorry. Policy, Mark, would you take us through it, please?
No, it's me.
Oh, God.
It's okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Ms. Gowan, there were two items that needed to be read into the agenda. Do you have those the document?
I believe I do. I'm so sorry. I forgot to bring it up. 2 seconds, please. My apologies. You know what? Could we come back to that after we do policy? We'll have a personnel part 2 while I get myself together. Okay, cool. Thanks. Go ahead, Darcy.
You'll have to be fast because I don't have much to say.
Yeah. Monique go before too.
There you go. Yeah, and nothing much has changed since our last, or actually nothing has really changed since our last meeting in terms of policy. In finance tonight, we did talk a little bit about the policies that finance is going to review, but we're going to do a little bit more of that before the next meeting. So for the next meeting, we should have a lot more on our agenda for next month. And I know Michelle has gone through the policies that are going to get divided between curriculum and equity and excellence. So I will have a chat with both of those committees at some point too about those policies. And I've asked Scott to add me to the personnel and the curriculum and the equity and excellence their next meetings, so that when you guys review those policies, I can be there just to offer any assistance, and just so I have a better sense of, you know, what your discussion is about those policies before they come back to policy to then get onto an agenda. So I feel pretty confident that in the next month or two, we can just cruise through the rest of these policies and get these off our plate and start 2021 on a good foot, right? Because isn't that what everybody wants to do? Let's just all start 2021 on a better foot, please, in as many aspects of our lives as humanly possible. And last week, Marilyn, you had pointed out that the 2622, the student assessment, didn't have that option in there. So if you got a chance to relook at that.
I saw that it was changed, yeah.
Yeah, it was there. So you guys can, you know, I want to make sure as much as possible when the policy committee is, you know, recommending a policy for approval, that we, you know, let you guys know what the changes are that we're recommending, what was there before, what the changes are, if there's an option, what those options were, what we picked, why, you know, in case, you know, the full board wants to change something. So yeah, so there's really no change other than that to the policies that are on the drive for first reading and second reading. And then the only other thing I wanted to kind of just bring out to the full board really quickly for a bit of a discussion, or just for us to all think about, I guess, and we don't have to decide anything tonight. But one of the things that we've been doing in the policy committee with a lot of the policies that come to us is changing pronoun stuff. And we've had some discussion just among the 4 of us, you know, whether we should use he, she, they, whether we should just use they. And one of the policies that we were reviewing for finance today, I noticed that when it used a pronoun, it used their. So, you know, what I would like to do is just make, you know, have us all agree on something. And then that's just, as policies come through, that's just what we change everything to. So whether that be, you know, he, she, they thing, or whether we just change everything to they. So, you know, Michelle has said that in the past, she thought just using they would be good. We kind of seem to land more on using he, she, they for all of them, just to be completely inclusive. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
think they is a lot simpler and it avoids kind of the singular having to change verb. I don't know. Just seems cleaner, but I don't really care. As long as we're inclusive.
I would agree. I would think that I think they is actually, it covers everything. So, and it's simpler.
It sure is simpler.
I agree as well.
Anybody else have any strong feelings one way or another? No? Excellent. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have for policy.
Other questions and concerns for Darcy, either involving they, he, she, or anything else? No. Okay, let me return to personnel for personnel part 2. There are some read-ins. Linda, you asked for a new number 3. Let's call it 3.5. How about that? Because number 3 is still on our agenda. So, okay, here's number 3.5, which I'm going to read in. Approval of extension of family leave of absence. I move that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the superintendent to approve an extension of the return from family leave of absence for employee number 364 from January 3rd, 2021 until June 1st, 2021. The employee will have exhausted their entitlements under FMLA and NJFLA as of January 3rd, 2021. Okay, so that's 3.5 or 3.1 or whatever we want to call it. 3.5, 3.1. Let's do 3.1. And number 16 is revised. So let me see here. Number 16. Actually, it looks like this should be perhaps number 15. Number 16 is a toileting stipend.
No, it's only because I moved everything down.
Yeah. Oh, but right. Of course. Had I done that. All right. Well, for my, do you mind if we go by 3.1 and then
That's
revise
fine.
number 15? Okay. All right. Revising number what is currently number 15. Let's see. Some of this is the same. I'm going to try to just make sure I point out the only part that is changed.
It's just the
Okay,
one.
just the one. Under high school coaching, first line, assistant boys basketball, Chris Brzezowski, the stipend should say 5,639, not 5,370. So sorry, Chris. And that is it for personnel. Any questions about those changes? Nope. Okay, equity and excellence. I think that's still Monique.
Yeah,
Am I
I
right about that?
actually, yeah, thank you. I don't have anything to share since last week. As Darcy mentioned, our next meeting, one of the items on our agenda will certainly be looking at some of the policies that we have coming up and applying an equity lens. So we look forward to discussing that with you, Darcy. And we'll make sure you get the meeting invitation if you haven't.
Thank you.
That's it.
Great. Anybody for Monique? Okay. It is now time for our second public comment. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board policies 164 and 167 establish and regulate the right of the public to participate in public meetings. This will be our final public comment session because we, at the beginning of earlier in the meeting, we changed our schedule. So this is your last chance to speak tonight. Please raise your hand, virtual or actual, and tell us your name and address. And we'll have a quick moment for people to get started. I see I have Rebecca Hirsch. Please go ahead whenever you're ready, Rebecca Hirsch, of whatever address.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Not me.
I never know. I never know if this works. My name is Rebecca Hirsch. I live at 331 Felton Avenue in Highland Park. I just want to say that, I don't discount the important issues that were discussed at the board meeting tonight, but it's a little disheartening to have a meeting go on for 2.5 hours and I don't hear about the kids getting an education. I mean, there are kids that are not failing, but struggling because they're bored and they don't feel like they're learning anything. And I don't want those kids to get lost either. I feel like this board is not really focused on education now. And I just don't want that to get lost among the other stuff. And I also, I feel like this board is very skewed towards high school kids. you know, there's meetings been going on for 2.5 hours. Does anyone know that Irving are closed again? I mean,
Yep.
it's just not, you know, it's not like this is a crisis. This is a crisis. These kids are, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old and they have nowhere to go and they really don't learn remotely and nobody's even talking about it. Like, it's just, you know, and I don't expect that the problem get fixed, you know, that I know that there's no easy fix and I know that it's a pandemic and trust me, like, it's just, everything is horrible, but I just feel like we're not focusing and educating the kids and also remembering that the district is more than high school kids. So that's all. I feel like we're leaving out so many kids in these discussions, and losing focus on actually getting them to learn, which is what this school district is supposed to be doing. So that, thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. I don't want to say too much. It was pointed out to me that lengthy discussions of public comments may give the public the impression that they're being judged or evaluated. I certainly don't want to do that. I will ask Scott to update us either at the next meeting or privately about what's the state of learning at Irving and Bartle. You're right, the board is unbalanced. I will say that there was quite a lot of discussion behind the scenes about the need to close Irving this week. Which
I thought you meant when we were reentry planning and talked a lot about the need to open up our schools.
Oh,
September.
well, I mean, that was the subject of voluminous hours on the phone. But just right now, the exposure situation that involved the exposures in the school. I mean, that is just incredibly disappointing. And, you know, we haven't talked about it tonight. You're right. It's all I can say from my perspective.
Can I just add something? Because the reason that I'm on this board is because of my background in early childhood, elementary education. So I don't know if that's appreciated as much as, you know, it should be in our conversations, but I view everything through that lens. So, you know, personal lives and personal family situations aside, the whole point of me being here is to view things through that lens. So that's just my reassurance on that.
I hear you, Michelle. I also hear Rebecca, though, saying that we haven't discussed that tonight, whether we feel that there was nothing to discuss or, you know, that we were trapped by circumstances beyond our control. However, you know, it is true that this board is skewed towards older kids and graduated kids, and you know that has an impact. So I do want us to be aware. I mean, there are definitely times. Times during this pandemic when people have said like, "Oh, what's the status? Is Irving in school right now?" And you know, if we had people on the board that were Irving students, they would be like, "Yeah, damn right, it's not." You know, and it stinks. I'm sure that we all do our very best to empathize with all the students in the district, but I think she makes a good point that.
I'm not saying she's not making a good point. I'm trying to reassure the community that we might have students that are older, but that is not our focus. We are not only talking about high school. And there's a lot of work going on, not just in public meetings. There's a lot of conversations that are happening. So it might appear that, you know, you can make a judgment on what we care about and what we don't care about from this discussion. And I just want to point out that that's unfair to do, that there's a lot of work being, you know, done around all age groups. And specifically for me, and I know for Mark as well, like we are very, very sensitive to the needs of young children, Irving children, and Marilyn, I would assume as well, because her grandson is in Irving school. So I take a little offense when people make that judgment.
Okay, understood.
Could I say one very brief thing, Anne, which is not about the commenting on this topic?
And, I don't want to get into arguing with a commenter.
No, I'm not.
It is what it is.
I did want to tell the community, though, and this is important to understand, that at this moment, only a very few handful of school districts in Middlesex County have any students going to school. And we have held out to the bitter end to where we feel it's now not safe in the buildings. And so we are forced to go remotely, hopefully for a very short time. But no one on this board is very happy about it. In fact, just the opposite. So it's very, very, very unfortunate. But we are really one of the last that's held out to not go fully remote. That's all I want to say.
I will say that Middlesex County is among the more sort of conservative districts that way, you know, for better or worse. Conservative counties, I'm sorry. Okay, Matt Hirsch, go ahead, please.
Thank you, President Gowan. My name is Matthew Hirsch, 333 Felton Avenue. Sorry to tag team you with a brother-sister duo there, but I did want to just say that as somebody with a kindergartner currently in private school, and a fourth grader who just who's now back at home, that sensitivity aside, Michelle, that we're public servants. Sometimes you got to take the criticism, or sometimes you got to feel the concern of the public and not take it as criticism, more likely. So when you sit for 2.5 hours in a meeting and you don't hear about how Bartle School is closed, that alienates a lot of parents. So maybe you should probably consider how you conduct the business of the board before you go being personally offended by non-offensive comments. That's why we're here at these meetings. We're here because our kids are in the schools, and we're here to get information, and we're here to understand what supports are there for the students and how we can help. And so please don't take personal offense at that type of commentary. It's not necessary and it's not useful. Thank you.
Understood. I saw Rebecca Hirsch's hand up. It's now not up anymore. I'll give everybody another couple seconds to decide if they would like to speak. All right, I see Dan Mladnick. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
Dan Mladnick, 216 Graham Street. And just want to make sure you all hear me okay. So I'm a teacher. I'm also a parent. So I'm kind of speaking with both hats, but I didn't hear the whole board commentary. I heard a little bit earlier in discussions about failure, and I'm similarly concerned with what I've seen personally. Is I've seen actually I had very good rates. I thought students were doing very well, and more recently I've seen a lot of drop off, especially amongst ninth graders. And I don't know if that would be consistent with everything that Dr. Taylor said, or with all of the data. But I know that the ninth graders that we had a team meeting today, and it seems like that age group is struggling much more than the higher grades. But I just want to say a couple things. That first of all, I agree wholeheartedly that we should try to do what we can to revise curriculum. And I know that for psychology, for example, I did a lot with resilience. I looked into the psychology of resilience and did a lot with that with all of my psych classes. And I know other colleagues who are doing quite a bit as well, who have made changes, and some of the changes that you're talking about. I do think, though, that a few of the important things in a time like this, in a pandemic, and in any sort of uncertainty that students face, having a clear sense of purpose is really, really vital. And having a sense of normalcy, having a sense of structure. I think in the spring, what I saw as a teacher is when we took away any sort of accountability from the students, I saw more students struggle than I'm seeing now. And I saw very few students putting their cameras on. I saw very little engagement, despite trying to do everything I could, to get kids as engaged as possible. I'm seeing much more engagement now. I'm seeing much greater sense of normalcy. I'm seeing much better attendance. I think, and I know this is not popular, so I was reluctant to speak, because I heard everybody's voices loud and clear. But I think if you send kids a message that you cannot fail, there's nothing, and they will quickly get that message. And so I think that we'll see what we saw in the spring, where we'll see very little attendance. We'll see very few kids with their cameras on, and we won't see kids learning as much as they are right now. So this is, my personal opinion, just based on my experience so far as a teacher. I'm also just thinking, I know that my kids are privileged, that it's different. Like they're not facing many of the hardships that many kids and families are facing. But if one of my children is not doing our assignments, I do want them to be held accountable, because I think that's going to, and I want to try to now understanding I want some empathy, and I want to be able to work with the teacher and things like that, just like I'm doing with my students. But a great deal of what I'm doing now from 1 to 3 is reaching out to the kids who've fallen off track and trying to get them back on track. And it's a lot of that happening. And then they'll get back on track, and some of them and fall back off. But I just feel like if we take away that sense of accountability, and we say all we're going to do is focus, and I know that's not exactly what's being said, but if all we're going to do is focus on your well-being, pretty soon we've lost one of the most important parts of their well-being. I mean, I think about when I used to teach 8th grade global civics, and we would learn about refugee camps and things like that. One of the most important things that happens in any refugee camp for people who are living there long term is they set up schools. They set up, they create systems to try to create a sense of normalcy. And so that's my 2 cents, just based on my experience. And I do appreciate what everybody's trying to do here. I think that I appreciate all of you, your service, and Dr. Taylor's leadership. I think has been so positive throughout all of this, and has really he's taking it from all sides. And I think that he's,
yes,
I really appreciate what everybody's trying to do to lead the school and the kids, and try in a good direction to try to make the best out of this, and hopefully we'll come out stronger. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. That's obviously excellent input from a teacher and someone with more of a expertise on resilience. So thank you. Let's see, anybody else for public comment? Wait a few seconds. All right, this is again our last public comment of the evening, so please hold your hand up now, or send us an email. Okay, let's go on to our board action items. Michelle, would you move the curriculum item, please?
Yes, I'd like to move item number 1 under curriculum and instruction.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Rizlevich?
Is he still here?
No.
Oh, he's no longer here. Whoops, I don't know when he left, sorry.
Okay. Mr. Woodward?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, finance and facilities. Mark, would you move those items, please?
Yes, indeed. I'd like to move items 1 through 16.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Discussion, questions? Linda, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Simoresti?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Woodward?
Yes.
All right, Mark, would you move the policy items, please?
Excuse me?
Whoa, personnel.
Personnel.
Oh, I was getting a little tired. I'd like to move the personnel items 1 through 18 with with number 15 corrected as read into the record, and the addition of 3.1. Is there a second?
Second.
Mark, did you have a?
Point of order. I thought we were tabling 15.
Oh, dear Lord. Yes. Yes, of course we were. I read in that long correction that we were
It's
actually
late.
tabling it.
It's late.
All right. I would like to move 1 through 16 with the addition of 3.1. And I would like to move that we table 15. So 1 through 16, 1 through 18, but not 15, which we are going to table, which I'm proposing we table. Is there a second to that lengthy dissertation?
Second.
All right, discussion, questions. Anybody got another hour here, you know? No, okay. Can we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Ms. Simorusti,
Yes.
Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Gowan,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner,
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola,
Yes.
Ms. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Woodward.
Yes.
All right, now I think we're ready for policy, Mark. Darcy. I'm a robot, what can I do?
You've got that ingrained in your brain.
I finally learned the order of the agenda and I'm not changing it.
I totally understand. When you get in a like routine of going through the agenda, you stick to the routine. I'm not offended, don't worry. I would like to move under policy items 1 and 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Okay, a roll call, Linda, please.
Ms. Simorusti,
Yes.
Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Gowan,
Yes.
Mr. Krieger,
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner,
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola,
Yes.
Ms. Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Woodward.
Yes.
Okay, we have no equity and excellence items. Board liaison reports. I have a proposal. If you have a board liaison report, please raise your hand or indicate that you would like to speak. Many of our commissions and organizations are not meeting during the pandemic, but I know some are. So let's see. Put up your hand, please, or just yell out.
I am not the library liaison, but I just wanted to recommend that everyone check the library website for events, because they're doing, unfortunately, they had to, stop their in-person visits, but they are doing some wonderful events, especially for children and teens.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it seems like they've been very active. What
Very
a godsend.
creative. Yeah, thank the Lord. So
Yeah.
just wanted to encourage everyone to check out the website there.
Excellent. Anybody else?
And I don't have anything. I just want to tell you my computer's at 5% and I'm not near my charger. So if I disappear, that's why.
Excellent. Okay. Well, fortunately,
And I did want to say quickly
yeah,
that
go for it.
CPAC, Special Education and Parent Advisory Committee, has not met, but I did speak to Rob, who is the new chair, and he did say they intend on meeting early January. So, because I wanted just to reach out to see if there was some activity and just to hear some of the concerns from obviously that segment of the parent community. So hopefully we'll have something to report.
That'd be great. It'd be great to hear more about how remote learning is going, among other things. Thank you, Monique. All right, I have no report. This is my last time as president addressing you all, so I've enjoyed it. It's been an honor. Thanks, everyone. Any old business? New business? Mark?
Yes, I just want to say that kudos to Anne for leading us in this extraordinarily difficult time, taking this task on, running the meetings, meeting at all sorts of hours with Scott, including weekends. And it's really been a pleasure working at your side. So thank you so much, Anne.
You're very kind, and thanks to you, Mark. This has really been a partnership, and I'd be lying if I didn't say Mark just is the workhorse of this partnership. Really incredible. Thank you. Thank you. All right. New business? Old business. All right. I move that we adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone want to stay? All right.
Second.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Night.
Take care.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.